One of the most ordinary days, like all the others, a girl with white hair announced that from today on, the little girl would be his wife, and he could play with her until he got tired of her. The woman was talking about a little girl who was now at her feet with a suitcase. This was too much for the mother-in-law because she was saying this to her 10-year-old son. Now he will play with his wife, but what if the boy then starts playing with his parents? That's exactly how it all ended in the original. The girl became a character in the novel, a villain who doesn't like any roads except those that lead to money, the only younger sister of the main character, Yuria. Cherie Mariol, unlike Yuria, who possessed divine powers and brought a miracle to the poor count's family. Chiraya, which was weak and did not bring in money, was nothing but a burden. On the day her sister went to the temple as a saint, the count and countess sold 10-year-old Chiria to the duchy for a pittance. And this duchy, where she was sold, is the house of her future husband, where the girl was hastily led. The whole point was that the count was in a hurry with the money, so they hoped that they had done the right thing in taking her in. Eventually, Mariol was led to the huge gates of the estate, abandoned alone, as if to the mercy of fate. But her thoughts were filled with only one thing, apparently. She was unlucky not only with her parents, but also with her mother-in-law. How could she possibly end up in this exact situation? If she had gotten here earlier, she would have tried to do something. But the girl arrived here exactly one day before she was sold. The girl hoped that Chiria had finally gone crazy. That day, she was suddenly grabbed by the hair, because even if she did it 100 times, her fate was sealed. Being sold to a snake pit the next day wouldn't change anything, so the girl could rejoice. After all, the day has finally come when she, being completely useless, will bring in at least some money. Her sister was exactly the same money-obsessed villain as in the novel, which is why the novel has that title. All this time, as she was thrown at the door that led to an unknown destination, she was immersed in her thoughts, not noticing anything around her. At that moment, a little boy came out from behind her and apologized for the fact that Mariol would have to marry someone like him. The boy's face expressed fear and regret, because he probably didn't like that everyone had decided this for him. This behavior was shocking, because the young girl certainly did not expect such an attitude towards herself in such a place. He was probably in the same place with her all this time, and only now decided to approach her when everyone had left. Kibrin Nectarian, a crazed psychopathic villain who turns the entire world into a sea of blood. Kibrin, who was called a monster from birth due to the snake scales and magic circles on his body, was locked away in the Duke's secluded mansion. As he grows up, he will go mad with the thirst for revenge and eventually brutally deal with all the people from the duchy. And she, Chiria, will become his wife and will be no exception, a sister with a terrible character and a husband who will become a crazy killer in the future. But it was all right, because if she hadn't been taken from the duchy, she would have ended up in a much worse place. Then the girl would probably sleep under the open sky. Her words sounded as if she were simply without a roof. It didn't matter now, because maybe she could raise Kibrin so that he wouldn't go astray. This boy was so sweet, so she wanted to get along with him, because they both were deprived of parental love. Chiria felt special that she could influence the character like that, and she was bound to succeed. But now she only wanted to see the bedroom, the place where they would live together. The boy was just about to take Mariol to the room she had asked him to take her to, when suddenly he stopped for some reason. It turned out that all this time he wanted to carry the lady's suitcase, which was in her hands. In that case, the girl could not refuse him such a request, holding out the suitcase into his hands. This act touched the young man's heart, and he promised to cherish this suitcase. He was very happy, but his bangs were so long that if he ran like that he would fall, which worried the lady. But fortunately everything turned out well. This boy, at such a young age, was not only outwardly cute, and after some time and long corridors through which they had to run, they arrived at the room. Surprisingly, it was much more spacious than she could have imagined. It didn't look like a child's room at all, and the windows didn't open at all. Were they really going to keep her locked up in this horrible place until she grew up? Besides this, one could notice that the bed linen was always changed, because it was quite fresh. But everything was not quite as Chiria thought, because the linen was not changed because no one entered the room. Although it looked as clean as if it had just been changed and made over, the young Duke did not sleep on the bed. In that case, where else could he sleep besides the bed? Everything was simple. Kibrin pointed to the crumpled blanket on the floor. But why is he sleeping on the floor in a lump of blanket, when all this time there was a spacious and comfortable bed? The boy could catch a cold like that, but there was a reason for that. The bed was too big. Perhaps he is afraid to sleep on it because the bed is too big, as it can fit as many as 10 Kibrins. It was both funny and sad, because he couldn't sleep peacefully at night because of this fear. There was nothing left to do but suggest sleeping together from today on, because it would be easier for both of us. What could have happened to make the girl become so kind to him, like no one else had been all this time? It was all because the young duke was now her husband, and now they would sleep together, which was clear anyway. In such a relationship you need to help each other, and the boy will help her with this. But besides this, from this moment on, the place next to her will always belong to Kibrin, so he could sit down next to her calmly, without even worrying about anything, as he had before. He had never been treated like that with kindness and love, because he considered himself an unwanted monster. But now everything was completely different, because a lady appeared in his life who cared about him so much. As soon as Nectarian lay down in bed with the girl, everything seemed to change, because together it was no longer so scary. Although this behavior on Mariol's part was embarrassing, he didn't know how to address her now. All this time she forgot to introduce herself to him. That's why he asked, so it was high time to introduce herself. It was all like a fairy tale. The young duke could not believe his luck that he was able to meet such a man. But it was just the beginning, because she decided that her goal would be to raise Kibrin well, so that he would not go crazy and die, showing a wonderful future. They quickly fell asleep in the same bed and slept all night, until early morning had already dawned over the kingdom. The young duke slept all this time until he was awakened by the girl's voice that had been trying to wake him up all this time. Sharia was in a wonderful mood, either from the sun or from happiness, but she was all aglow as if in a dream. From this moment on, it was the second day since she had been sold to the duchy, and it was time to begin this day. It was worth starting with the search for food, which is what they did. High on the cupboard there was a bowl of vegetables. But they were too high up, and even with a chair it was not easy to reach them. How could it be that there was not a single cook in the mansion? Although she wouldn't be the only one who could reach it, since Kibrin was the same height as her. Be that as it may, locking up a child and not even feeding her properly was a crime, and being Korean in her past life, she absolutely cannot forgive this. But if they didn't get the basket, they might be left without any food today, which would be even worse. I urgently needed to somehow get out of this situation, when suddenly a stick and cloth caught my eye. They were lying on the floor, so no one needed them. You could take them without fear. In that case, they could be used, but the boy's help was needed, because without him, nothing would work. Sharia suggested throwing the basket with the stick she found while he tried to catch it with the cloth. But he had to be careful, because she could fall right on his head. Once the plan was devised, it was time to act. As soon as she stood up on the chair again, she managed to reach the basket with her stick, thereby shaking it. And just a few moments later, all the vegetables and fruits that were in the basket were right there in their hands. They managed to get an apple, a potato, and a carrot. Probably something could be made from this. To all this, meat could be added and made into a stew, so the lady decided to prepare it for Kibrin. The girl's determination was irresistible. Although she looked young, she was in fact already a young woman. So she could definitely cook some kind of stew without any problems. She just had to peel the potatoes and chop everything up. But even here there were problems because she was small. The knife was too big for her. So just peeling potatoes was a real challenge, not a routine task. After watching Lady Sharia try to peel potatoes, the young duke couldn't resist offering to do it himself. He would obviously do much better than she would, because looking at the potatoes, it was clear that they would definitely not eat today. Has her culinary abilities really been revealed? In her past life, the kitchen was always a mess because she always relied on her mother. There was nothing left to do but trust him, but it was still worth remaining careful because the knife was sharp. Moments later, the potatoes were peeled and looked many times better than the ladies. Thanks to Kibrin, they finished much sooner than she thought, and with everything finished, she wanted to know more about him. For example, the fact that he ate all this time while she was gone was unexpected for him, but she was just curious. Of course, the young duke did not want to talk about it. The whole point was that she might think it was disgusting. There was definitely no point in asking more. It was worth at least somehow distracting myself from such a not very pleasant conversation. After all, they would now eat together the food that they had been able to prepare together, something Nectarian had been looking forward to. Finally, the food was prepared and we could eat in peace and, most importantly, try the dish. Having only tried one spoonful, as she thought, the food was not the most delicious without spices. But at least they probably won't get poisoned by this. But what tasteless food he ate before this. After all, his face was glowing from her, and most importantly, eating was much tastier next to Sharia. At that moment the boy looked happy, because he had never been treated like that before. Now you could clearly see his face, and thanks to the sun's rays you could see the scales on his cheek. In addition, one could see that in his sleep he was constantly trying to tear off his scales, which clearly did not work. This long and intense eye contact was very unsettling to him, as it was something new. He thought the lady was disgusted by his face, but it was not so at all. She thought he was nice. It was the first time that anyone thought he was cute, since everyone treated him like a monster. But Sharia was worried about him and asked him to continue eating so that he could grow taller than her, even though he liked that she was taller than him. In that case, she will also try to grow up, but it was worth doing it together. After such a hearty breakfast, they went to the office where the lady was writing something on paper. She wrote about the stairs and the dress, which was so heavy that it was impossible to wear. A dress hung with huge precious stones, but how can she change it alone, without a maid? This is definitely some kind of mockery, and because the pen was too big, the lady accidentally wrote about a worm. But that wasn't the main purpose of their arrival here, because she checked just in case, but the windows in the library were also locked from the outside. Everything looks luxurious, although in reality they are just in prison, and sunlight is very important for a growing child. While they were busy, a bell rang, signaling that some people would soon arrive. This frightened the young duke very much. He urgently needed to hide somewhere so as not to be noticed. Sharia couldn't stand this kind of treatment of the boy, so she decided to go along with him, even though he needed to hide. Everything was fine, the lady assured him of his safety, since she was now next to him. It was like a breath of fresh air when she extended her hand to the young man, inviting him to go. They ran out of the library like lightning, hurrying somewhere, probably heading towards the sound of the bell. And now one could hear the voices of the maids, who were only complaining that they had to work in such a place. Kibrin couldn't hear this because they were discussing him, but besides that, they were planning to steal the gems to lift their spirits. The head maid told them about this, because surely no one would even notice they were missing. But what would they do if they were caught? But she was still the same monster, so there was no need to worry. This behavior of the maids was even better, because now there was a chance to get out and see what was outside. Surely a child like him was curious all this time to see what was on the street, but he must have been told countless times not to go outside. Seeing how sad the young duke was, the lady could not help but lift his spirits, because now she was nearby. Nothing will happen if they go outside for a couple of minutes. On the contrary, it will even be better. Sharia extended her hand as if inviting him to come with her and find out everything. As soon as he took her hand, they immediately ran to explore something new. The route wasn't the fastest and we had to run for quite a long time, but it was worth it. After all, as soon as they ran up, one could see that the main gate was open. Meanwhile, all the maids were quite far away and were clearly not heading in their direction. But besides this, there was a guard outside. Although only one, but he was there, it would be difficult to pass him unnoticed. And behind the knight there was a carriage. Perhaps he was still a newbie, so it would be easy to fool him. Everything seemed to have adjusted itself to them, so that the young count could finally go outside and see many new things. This was their chance, which was unlikely to appear anytime soon, so they had to take advantage of this opportunity. Of course, they were not allowed to go outside, which the guard knew perfectly well and sent them back. But retreat was impossible, and Sharia knew this very well. She set herself the goal of getting out, no matter what the cost. And judging by his tense posture, he was definitely a newbie, which was all the better. And the uniform on him looked completely new and almost unworn. He was definitely a newbie. Besides this, the lady needed the knight to help her get something that she could ask from the maids who entered the mansion. Unfortunately, they were busy, and besides, they had gone to rip the jewels off her dress. The knight couldn't believe it, because they were all carefully selected by Madame. This couldn't be. Everything led to him thinking that Mariole was lying to him, but her face showed confidence in her words. In the end, he couldn't leave it like that, and asked them to wait for him here for a bit in order to check everything personally. Having told them not to go far, he left with these words. The plan worked. For a couple more seconds they watched as the guy disappeared inside the palace. Chiria couldn't keep her attention on the knight for long. Her gaze was drawn to something completely different. She first noticed the mansion. It was big and beautiful, and its nickname was the Snake's Lair. It was all because Kibrin had snake scales on his face and magic circles on his back from birth. His father, the Duke, had been examining his son's back since his birth and discovered that it contained complex sealing magic. It usually appears when someone casts a spell, but such a spell cannot be cast on a child while it is in the womb. Eventually, people began to say that Kibrin was a monster that God had sealed away before he was born because the hideous snake had donned a human mask. The Duke and Duchess are especially big believers in this rumor, and they ended up locking their son, Kibrin, in this mansion, nicknamed the Snake's Lair, on his 9th birthday. How much time has passed since Kibrin was last outside? Was this really the first time he had gone outside since he had been locked up? Normally, in a situation like this, she would have suggested running away. Although, of course, they would be caught immediately if they tried, and since they were already out, he could look around to his heart's content. It turned out that he had already looked around. Beautiful flowers and a clear sky, that was what surrounded them. But among all these beauties and wonders, Lady Chiria was much more beautiful than some flowers and the sky. And the girl's hair was like the color of dawn, while Nectarian's face glowed with joy. It was an unexpected compliment, since they had come out to look at the street, so perhaps they should have said thank you. Which is what the girl did, with the same joyful and happy smile, as if she had been waiting for this all along. And yet, now it was better for the boy to look around and not at her face, since he hadn't been outside for so long. Moreover, he must have been interested, since the young Duke was still quite young. While they were admiring the nature, loud cries for mercy were heard from the palace apparently. The knight had dealt with the maids. This turned out to be exactly the case, because moments later, one of the maids who had been stealing stones from the dress lay at their feet. Jewelry was found in the maid's belongings, and upon examination it was discovered that these were the very same stones from the young lady's dress. The knight promised to report this incident to the madam so that they would be punished for such a rude act. The girl in front of them played amazingly, although she did indeed rip the decorations off Mariole's dress. But given how she is treated in the duchy, she doesn't really need to play hard. She could probably even rival her sister in a best acting competition. Was it a curse that was placed on Lady Chiria? But the ornament that the maid was wearing caught her eye. It was the symbol of the temple, but why did people from the temple work as maids in the Duke's house? Once they had dealt with this matter, the knight asked them to return to the mansion. But of course the girl was still worried about those maids, as it turned out. People from the temple are all like that. They deliberately create problems to torment his mother even more. In the original story, the reason for Kibrin's imprisonment was not only the Duke and Duchess, but also significant pressure from the temple. Apparently, this is why Kibrin took revenge on both the ducal couple and the temple, although apparently he does not yet hold a grudge against the Duchess. Because the original was discontinued, she didn't know how it ended, but the boy's ending was definitely not good. Conversely, the protagonist, her sister, and her temple must have been thriving, but what if she is going down the wrong path? What if the only right decision was not to get involved with Kibrin from the start, but everything still went wrong? All this time the young lady remained silent, which made the boy nervous, that he should not have spoken like that. But it was all good. He shouldn't have worried so much about saying such words in her presence. As a sign that everything was fine, the lady stroked his head in order to somehow calm him down. Nectarian was surprised by such an act, but he could tell her everything, because they were no longer strangers. What could she do right now? All she could do was somehow educate Kibrin. Maybe then he will become at least a little kinder. Maybe then she will become at least a little kinder. A lot of time passed from that moment, and deep night hung over the mansion, illuminated only by the moon. The young Duke had been dozing peacefully in bed for a long time, but there was no lady lying next to him as usual. She had not slept all this time and was simply looking out the window, which was closed, as if she was thinking about something. And in her hands she held precious stones, which were apparently stolen from her dress by the maids. The girl was definitely up to something, because the first thing they needed to do was get out of this damned mansion. During the day, the maids tore the diamonds from her clothes, and in the kitchen she barely managed to get the magic stone out of the lantern. This should be enough to break the window. In the original work, there are two types of magic stones. Red magic stones, which can sometimes be obtained by killing monsters, and artificial magic stones, created by mages in their likeness. Blue magic stones are particularly vulnerable to diamonds and will cause a weak explosion when broken. If she breaks the window with this, she will be able to go out onto the terrace. It was visible from the outside that if she ties a rope, she can climb down. Of course, she's not going to run away right now. First, she needs to secure an escape route and then slowly wait for a convenient opportunity. Fortunately, the maids almost never enter Kibrin's room, but will these gloves be enough? But now it was time to calm down, because she couldn't raise Kibrin in such a terrible place. The original also told the story of the young count's past, how he was told that the streets were too dangerous for him. He was too little to understand that they simply wanted to lock him away from the outside world. But the woman reassured him that everything was fine, and she would definitely find a solution even in such a situation. With each such word, he believed in it less and less, until one day everything turned upside down. After all, the man then lured her over to his side, perhaps even intimidating her with something. He was a great hindrance to his parents' lives. He had heard these words since childhood, if not from birth. Almost every day the boy sat in his room and blamed himself for all the problems. While doing so, he tore the scales off his face, which only brought pain, but there was no other choice. He was simply an uncontrollable disaster. The scales on his face confirmed it. But even if I tore it away, it always returned after a while. It's not the world that's dangerous, but the boy. And after some time, the very day came when the young master had to be isolated. Nectarian didn't understand anything, but he knew that his presence was causing suffering to those around him. His mother asked him to wait a little longer until the very end, because there was nothing she could do now. Of course, he understood perfectly well that this was how it had to be, because he had been told this his whole life. At that moment, a small explosion sounded, which pulled the boy out of his terrible dream. Once he realized everything, Kibrin could not understand where Lady Cheria was, because she was not nearby. And as soon as he saw the girl, he fell into horror, because the picture he saw after the nightmare was not the best. Mariol was at the already broken window, not suspecting that this would wake him up. She tried to be very quiet so as not to wake him. Her hands were all covered in wounds and bleeding a little. This is what the young duke was afraid of, that because of him people would suffer again, especially those he held dear. And of course he didn't understand what she had just done to cause such a loud explosion. The lady justified herself by saying that the window was closed, and neither the cool breeze nor the sunlight could get in. So she broke the window and opened it. Now she can breathe in as much fresh air as she wants. And if you stick your hand through this gap and open the window from the outside, you can go out onto the terrace. This was all very good, but the boy was not at all happy about it, as Chiraya thought. It was because of this act that the lady got hurt, which greatly upset the boy. But everything was fine. The girl didn't feel a bit of pain, and what's more, it would heal on its own later. All this didn't bother Kibrin. He just wanted to look at the hands. There was pain in his eyes from what had happened, and tears were welling up in his eyes. It was painful for him to watch this. This whole picture surprised the girl a little, because she was expecting a completely different reaction. She couldn't look at it for too long, so she agreed to examine her hands. The young duke probably doesn't like to look at this. Perhaps it's better not to do it. But he didn't listen to Mariol at all, because he wanted to do it. As soon as he was able to examine his hands, white particles appeared around him, and his hands glowed with a bright light. It was surprising and unusual because this was not at all in the original. All the wounds that were on her hands from the explosion of stones gradually disappeared, as if they had never been there. But how could this be? The girl's surprise was impossible to describe because it was amazing. While the boy tried to heal the wounds on his hands, new scales gradually appeared on his face. The scales were growing due to the treatment. It was obvious that it was hard for him. It was necessary to stop it sooner. Cabrin had no desire to listen to the lady at all, so he continued the treatment until there was nothing left on his hands. The boy had healing magic all this time, which was not the case in the original. Had he always been able to do this, which he himself did not even know how it happened? In general, the healing ability was difficult even for magicians, which is why her sister, the saint, is so revered. It was a pity, though. She thought that this could cure his hand too, but it didn't hurt, so everything was fine. In that case, the young lady wanted to know how Nectarian managed to get hurt. This happened because he is a monster, of course. Such an answer did not suit her at all. After all, he was not a monster at all. He was able to get along with the girl, all because she was wonderful. But maybe Lady Chiria was the same as him. Maybe she gets along with him because she is also a monster. At that moment, the young Duke's eyes lit up, because he hoped that he was not the only one. It was hard to say that it wasn't so anything could be. He was so happy about this news, it will probably be even better for him. After such a tiring healing, Cabrin suddenly felt sleepy, so he decided to go to bed again. It was even for the best, because it was possible to think everything over. In any case, she would soon go to bed too. But everything was somehow strange. The healing ability of Cabrin, which was not in the original, or his attitude towards the Duchess, which seems to be free of hostility, is different from what she knew. There is too much information that was not in the original. Perhaps there is some other reason that was not mentioned in the original. It was still worth thinking about, but it was time to sleep, and so the next day arrived. In the morning, the Duchess arrived, who knew everything and from now on will personally control everything. This news greatly shocked Chiria, because it was definitely not what she expected to see in the morning. And the Duchess personally fulfilled her request, which was even more surprising. She ordered to throw away all the dresses that she had given before and suggested that a little girl look at them. The woman was talking about the dresses that were hanging on the hanger. She wanted to know if she could put them on herself. Did she really care about her, but why would she? So that will be quite enough. While they were talking about this, the young Duke ran into the room, clearly missing his mother. But he ran so fast that he couldn't keep his balance and fell in front of everyone. The boy's behavior greatly shocked the Duchess. She wanted to shout at him. But she was able to stop in time and remain silent, because she shouldn't have behaved that way. Lady Chiria couldn't bear to watch this, and immediately ran up to the boy, very worried about him. Although she was worried about him, she was more worried about the situation that had just happened. The woman's reaction when Cabrin fell spoke for itself. She was worried about him. There were still some circumstances that she didn't know about, and that she just needed to find out about. The Duchess was not allowed to stay here long, but the lady had to check everything and make sure. There was nothing left to do but somehow detain her by offering to rest a little while she made some tea. Her look was childish and sweet, but the way she called her mother caused mixed feelings. These words did not go unnoticed by the Duchess. It was something unusual for her. After all, she didn't understand why some girl called her mother, although the maids warned her not to stay here for long. But how dare a servant control his mistress's actions? There was definitely something wrong with this. Come to think of it, those maids yesterday were also from the temple, so maybe it's somehow related. They were making a lot of noise, and it was worth remembering that they were here precisely because of some situation. The woman clearly wanted to stay in this place longer, so she ordered tea to be brought. This was good news. After a while, tea was served to the Duchess. But its taste was simply disgusting, which is not surprising, since it was brewed by the young Duke. What is good for the body is bitter to the tongue. The woman is truly not at all the same as she knew her. In the original, she was just a typical villain, an extra who hated her deformed son. And now she's like a person who simply can't be trusted. Now she was revealed as a completely new character. It was worth getting to know more. Just as she was about to ask, the maid reminded her that time was running out, and that could have a bad effect on the young master. And the temple maids act as if they are trying with all their might to separate the Duchess from Cabrin. And yet, their words had a good effect on the woman, and she really should have left. But before leaving, she gave the lady some advice. If she wanted to survive, she should keep her ears open. She had no allies in this terrible place, so any action she took would have consequences. It was worth sticking to your image of the child, calling her mother again. She will remember her words. Her behavior was unusual for a duchess, but it was still worth leaving here. Moments later, the doors to the room were locked and there was no trace of the Duchess. Of course, Nectarian heard the whole conversation, and if the lady doesn't mind, then he will always be with her. Besides this, she was interested in how she would now control everything personally and how it would work. The young Duke looked very happy. Apparently he enjoys meeting the Duchess. But he liked Sharia too, and he apparently thought she asked about it out of jealousy. There were still some differences from the original. When it arrives tomorrow, I'll have to keep my eyes peeled. And when the next day came, the Duchess did not come. Instead, a maid stood at the door. It all seemed somehow strange because why did this happen? But nothing can be done, since they have neglected the generosity shown by the temple. They are doing cleanup work today, so they should have kept quiet. It wasn't generosity at all, but a threat. But why did they need to carry out cleansing work? It was all because all the places where Kibrin was were desecrated. That is why they need to be cleaned periodically, otherwise the Duke and Duchess will be in danger. Therefore, if the young master was really worried about the Duchess, he should have kept his distance. The maid reached out her hands to the boy, which did not please Sharia, who hit her. Was she already behaving like a little lady of the ducal house? It seemed that being a saint's sister was not enough. But she, a servant who was arrogant because of her connection with the temple, was not very pleasant to look at. Since she is a holy sister, how can she do anything it was not worth continuing? Because how can she, a person without divine power, even dare to interfere? These words shocked the maid, because how could such a little girl know about this? She asked if she could do everything, since she was a holy sister after all. Some things were possible. In the original, Sharia also had a rejection reaction to divine power, but her sister's power was something of an exception to the rule. In any case, she didn't feel anything from that maid, so there's probably nothing special about her. Now she has a rough idea, judging by what she saw, that the temple is using Kibrin as a cover. In order to manipulate the ducal family at their own discretion, if you think about it, in the original, it was the temple that first called Kibrin a monster. Although the novel did not say that they sent people to separate Kibrin and the Duchess, she slowly began to feel as if the novel had deceived her, and she increasingly disliked the people from the temple. Nectarian too, but his parents said everything was fine, and even though he was born a monster, they promised to be there. But they changed after the people from the temple came. In order for the young Duke to grow up good, he must leave this mansion. But if they secretly escape, the temple will be able to catch the two children without any problem, but they will also not be able to expose the temple's misdeeds without evidence. But what if her father-in-law and mother-in-law also want to live with Kibrin as before? The boy, just like her, wanted to run away from here, but how? Everything was simple. Didn't he want to play an interesting game with her? To play this interesting game and escape, you had to wait until night when no one would be there. And as soon as Sharia was sure that there was no one in the mansion, she could remember the plan again. The escape plan was that they would first pretend to be asleep and unsuspecting. Meanwhile, a large fire starts in the kitchen on the first floor for an unknown reason. They wake up and see strange smoke and flames, and in a hurry they escape through the window of a room on the second floor. The plan was perfect, and nothing could spoil it, not even some temple maids. But although the plan was well thought out, there was only one problem with it. They had to jump from the second floor, although the height was not that great for an adult, but for children it was different. If a girl falls incorrectly from such a height, she will at least break something. All this time, Nectarian had been preparing everything for their escape plan and was already ready to implement it. He did everything as she said. If he pulled the rope, the magic stone and the diamond would collide. In that case, it was possible to start by taking the rope. The young Duke should step back, because it was dangerous. This was the most exciting moment, because if nothing works out, I will have to come up with a new plan. And when the opportunity to escape again would present itself was unknown, all that was left was to try. As soon as the young lady pulled the rope, there was some kind of reaction. Luckily, everything worked out, and as soon as the stones collided, a fire started on the first floor. The smoke even reached the second floor, which meant it was worth hurrying before the fire reached it. Everything was going exactly according to plan, so Mariol decided to go down first. And when she came down, she would catch him with a blanket, so that all he had to do was carefully descend. It was time to start, because soon the fire could get them if they didn't hurry. For Sharia, descending the rope was very scary, because any wrong move and she would fall. It was only the second floor, but because of my small stature, the distance seemed large. I needed to calm down, because when she was as close to the ground as possible, I could calm down. But at that very moment, her arms failed her, and she fell down without even having time to descend. Luckily, there was a sheet underneath her that had risen up as if it had been expecting this. It was some kind of magic, because this couldn't have happened on its own, but it was precisely this that saved the girl. She didn't understand what it was, because for a moment she felt her body float up. By this time the young Duke had already descended, but how did he manage to land so deftly? Apparently all psychopathic villains are this unusual from childhood. Even her sister is exactly the same. Now they had finally escaped from this damned mansion, and they could breathe a sigh of relief. And luckily it just started raining, so he will probably be able to put out the fire. The mansion was already pretty badly burned, but she burned down the mansion that belonged to the ducal family. So if they are found out that they started the fire, then the lady will be divorced. What if they demand payment for repairs from her, but Nectarian won't allow that to happen? As soon as he said these words, a carriage drove up, which was obviously in a great hurry to arrive at the place. Kibrin's mother, who was very worried about her son, rushed out of the carriage. The maid who came with her did not want to let her go, for which she was yelled at because she had to run away quickly. Lady Cheria was not against this outcome of events, so she pushed the boy to approach. She watched as the young Duke and Duchess hurried towards each other despite the rain. Suddenly, an unknown man with an umbrella approached her from behind. He was a white-haired man with bright yellow eyes, and he exuded danger. The man smelled of cigars, but he was worried about the girl, whether she was hurt somewhere. His appearance struck Mariole, because she had not at all expected that someone would approach her like that. But what attracted more attention was his right arm, which was missing, and his clothes were just hanging down. This man was Cybran's father, Manrik Nectarian, the youngest swordmaster and de facto ruler of the Lost Dark City. But despite his abilities, he hardly appears in the original at some point. A rumor even began that Winter had become the head of the family instead of her wayward husband. If he hadn't lost his right arm, his abilities would have surpassed even the protagonist. But how did he lose his right hand? The original version said that he caused a disturbance in the temple. Kibrin's mother turned out to be completely different from the one in the novel, but what about him? He could be the same. Because the young lady was thinking about this, she didn't notice how she accidentally hit the Duke. But there was nothing scary about it. Thanks to her, he woke up completely. It was surprising that he didn't get angry when he suddenly said that he couldn't come close. Apparently the problem was in the boy's conversation with the woman, because she was told that she was hurting him. Cheria didn't like this horrible picture at all, so she asked the man to let her go. That's what he did. He had no intention of keeping her without a reason. As soon as she got down, she ran to Kibrin, because she would only stand under the same umbrella with him. Leaving Manrik alone without an umbrella in a heavy downpour meant there was no need to worry about him. Although it was a little cruel towards the Duke, it was too late to change anything. It hadn't been more than a couple of minutes since Mariole was with the young Duke, and at this rate she might catch a cold. Of course, the boy convinced her that everything was fine, which was hard to believe. After all, now he doesn't have to tell her that he's okay, like he usually does. Because Cheria has strong shoulders that can hug him. They were not at all reliable, as she said, but they could be relied upon. These words touched Nectarian deeply, because no one had ever said such words to him before. The whole picture looked sad, a burnt-out mansion, the rain trying to put it out, and the long-awaited meeting with the parents. They stood like that for some time in the rain while it put out the strong fire. But it was impossible to stay here for long, so it was time to return. Winter seemed to be thinking about something, because she wasn't paying any attention to the words, until Lady Cheria approached her and was able to return her to the real world. The woman asked not to call herself mother, but that was not what worried the girl at all. She wondered if she should ask where the fire came from and how they managed to escape. Even though she bought her from that Count Mir, she shouldn't consider herself her equal. But this could be discussed later, but now she should get into the carriage and not stand there like a pillar. They just got into the carriage and were able to look at the burnt mansion for the last time. But Mother remained there. Apparently she had some unfinished business. As expected, she would arrive later. Separately, they said that if Winter approached Kibrin, his condition would worsen. It sounded somehow implausible, so they sat in silence for another couple of minutes. The temple had always disliked their family, so it was most likely a lie. But what if any of this is true? What if those dogs from the temple told the truth? These thoughts never left his head. It's hard to risk the health of your own child. It's not that they are good parents, but still, I wouldn't want to lose a child. Mariol did not understand at all what kind of person this Duke was. He was unusual and strange. However, this is natural, since now they are all complex characters in the novel. While they were talking and thinking about Carton, they were almost there. And as soon as the carriage drew closer, the sight of the mansion amazed the young lady. It was large and luxurious, and the sunlight only added to the beauty of the mansion. The whole view was beautiful, and the girl couldn't tear herself away from the carriage window. It was difficult to notice, which is why the Duke realized that she liked it. So he ordered the servant driving the carriage to slow down a little so that Sharia could admire it longer. But they still arrived at the mansion and had to get out of the carriage, and the first words they heard were not the best. They will leave the capital as soon as possible. Having pulled Kibrin out of the mansion, they have violated the agreement with the temple. The temple actively assists in containment and treatment, and in exchange, Kibrin is required to remain in isolation in a separate wing for the duration. And he and Winter must not leave the capital so that the temple can watch them. Well, there are a few more details, like they check to see if Kibrin is really a monster by sending tribute. This is probably about her. In the original, it was written that Kibrin was simply sent a toy for fun, not a toy, but a tribute. In the end, she was deceived by the novel for which she paid her own money, for which the author Raphael must now explain and compensate for everything. But why did the Duke tell her all this, for which he only apologized? Chiraya clearly didn't like this answer, for which he thanked him, asking what the hell this uncle was thinking. Well, she still won't understand everything, because now she's only 10 years old. Then, leaving the capital, they will go to the ducal domains. She might go with them if she wants to. As soon as the young lady got out of the carriage, Nectarian arrived and was also offered his hand. Of course, he didn't take advantage of this and simply jumped off himself without any help. This behavior of his own son greatly disappointed the Duke. Sharia felt something was wrong from the start, but they really do have such a bad relationship. After which the Duchess herself arrived and ordered Mir to take Sharia to the bath and wash her. It was even better this way anyway. Dad would never have given them the saint. And it doesn't look like my sister would go obediently even if Dad let her go. In the original, the sister also never used divine power unless she wanted to. It got to the point that Dad gave in, and the main character, the Crown Prince, came to persuade her. Moreover, from the very beginning, the sister's divine power would not have recognized Kibrin's scales as a disease. The original stated that the adult Kibrin had no scales unless it was through his sister's divine power. How did he get rid of it? It would have been good if it had simply disappeared with age. At this time, the maid noticed that the young lady was probably very cold and so thin. She was supposed to take care of her, but maids who did not belong to the temple were strictly forbidden from entering that mansion. Mara was so worried about her because she knew that it was only a formal marriage, but in reality she was simply sold. Besides, she is the sister of the saint who does not treat Kibrin, and she can be accused of arson, but she cannot even object. She had many sins, but Mara had tears in her eyes. She was probably very scared, but the main thing was that she was next to the young master, which was a joy. Now she will be next to the young lady, so now she must eat a lot of tasty things and gain weight. It was somehow unusual after she came here. No one treated her so well. When she has washed herself, the maid will make her some warm cocoa. It is very tasty. There was a very strange feeling inside. Mara was like an angel who would now be nearby. And as soon as she had washed herself, the maid informed her that today she could sleep with the young master. And tomorrow she will have her own room. Not forgetting about the cocoa, the maid hurried for it. She really was like an angel, which only made her and not only happy. Kibrin was also glad that he was actually able to return home, only thanks to Sharia. The Duchess said that he didn't need to come back now. The young lady really could do anything. It wasn't entirely true. She wasn't omnipotent, but that look kept her from saying so. I should have played along with him, because it was a fantastic idea to set the house on fire in order to return home. Suddenly, she realized that all this was somehow strange. No one asked about the fire in the mansion. Although she made it all seem quite plausible, they could have asked. Maybe they're just going to ignore it, but they just arrived, so she's probably jumping to conclusions. In any case, it was time for them to go to bed now, but the young Duke didn't want to at all. But after swimming and the accumulated fatigue, Sharia wanted to. Nothing could be done. She would have to tell some kind of story. It was so good that Kibrin liked everything the young lady told him. In that case, it was possible to lie down in bed and tell the long-awaited story. I didn't have to think long about what story to tell. Once upon a time there lived a hard-working ant. This hard-working ant got up at 5 in the morning and returned from work at 11 in the evening. He was deceived into paying his entire salary at once for overtime work. But in the end, he couldn't even take his hard-earned money, which he still regrets they did this because she was younger than them. The boy hoped that this hard-working ant would be happy in the next life. With these words, Mariol fell asleep, and little by little she began to forget who she was before becoming Sharia. After some time, from all these nightmares, she woke up. Trying to remember what her name was in her past life, she remembered almost nothing. But then, quickly falling asleep again, morning came and the sun illuminated the entire kingdom. The young Duchess woke up alone in bed. Her body felt heavy and her skin itched. Perhaps she had been bitten by an insect. At that moment, the young Duke, who had already stood up for a long time, arrived. Did he sleep well? Because it seems he fell asleep while she was telling him some story. As soon as he remembered that cruel story, his face became sad, but the boy still said that it was very interesting. Which was obviously a lie, but besides that, her mother called her, saying that she needed to pass on something. She might have been going to ask about the fire in the mansion, but there was nothing she could do. She had to go. As soon as the young lady tried to get out of bed, she felt even worse, because she had been feeling unwell since the morning, asking the young Duke for help, whether he would allow him to lean on him to get there. Of course he agreed, and as soon as they changed and went downstairs, not the best scene awaited them. There was not only the Duchess below, but also people from the temple. But what were they doing here? And that explained why she felt so bad. It was all because of the divine power. People were talking about whether she was really going to be at odds with the temple. In that case, they will take away all the maids belonging to the temple. The woman must also send the young Duke out of the country before the next day. Apparently that was all they wanted to say. They were all still just as arrogant. Doesn't she feel sorry for the inhabitants of the empire who are destined to become the boy's victims? Although she is not a resident of the empire. So, of course, she doesn't know anything about what happened exactly like this, but she considers the god of the empire to be merciful. If he allowed them to wag their tongues, it was a direct insult to the temple. But if they still have time to chat, then it's time to leave. After all, they were the ones who told her to leave before the change of day. Are they really going to detain her? With these words, the people from the temple had to leave the mansion humiliated. In that case, it was possible to approach the Duchess, since she was now left alone. But just looking at her from behind, one could tell that her whole mood was ruined. And her hands were shaking, either from fear or from anger, but her fist was clenched with incredible force. It seems like she's not okay after all, but there's nothing to be done. It was worth talking to her. As soon as the Duchess noticed them, she immediately announced that they would leave the capital as soon as they finished packing. They might never come back, so if there was something Sharia wanted to do, it was better to hurry. There was nothing she wanted to do, so she asked to look at the garden. It was the only request, but a very strange one in the woman's eyes. After all, no one asks permission to take a walk in their own house. These words greatly pleased the girl, after which the Duchess went about her business. Still, she was definitely deceived by this novel. She is like the personification of the carrot and stick. She so naturally made it clear that she was a member of the ducal family, while Kibrin was looking out for something. It turned out that he was trying to remember the faces of the people from the temple, because when she grew up, he would immediately punish them. It was very commendable that he was trying to protect his family until he said he would kill them. But you shouldn't go that far. She barely pulled him out of the snake pit, you can't say that. But why not firstly? If he kills the priest, he will have big problems. It was all because he heard them say that they wanted Mother to die sooner. Who dared to say such a thing, especially about parents in front of a child? Then maybe everything will be okay if he doesn't get caught. Suddenly, Chiria remembered that it was still a long way off before he grew up, so she could think about it later. She almost gave in. If she relaxed because he was a child, there would be trouble, but now she wanted to go to the garden with the young duke. He didn't mind, but was the lady sure she didn't want to visit her family? She can't say that her birth parents sold her to the ducal family. She preferred being with Kibrin, but as soon as they took a few steps, Chiria felt worse. Although the priests have long since left, so why is her head spinning and her strength continues to fade? It may have been a cold, that must have been it, but it cannot be denied that it could have been some kind of incurable disease. In that case, her father-in-law and mother-in-law might not take her, but she did not want to return to the Count's house at all. With these thoughts, she lost her remaining strength, causing her to fall to the floor, causing a commotion. Quite a lot of time passed from that moment, and only in the morning of some day she opened her eyes. The first thing the lady saw was the Duchess sitting next to her and some girl behind her. It was amazing that the woman sat all this time and waited for her to wake up. And only then did she remember that when the priests left, she wanted to walk with Kibrin in the garden. Suddenly she fainted. But where is the young duke now? They took him to the room because he was very scared. It's not surprising, a man suddenly fell next to him, but why did Mariol fall then? And the mother's expression is not good if she really has an incurable disease. She may simply not take her into the duchy. What to do then? A couple of minutes later, unexpectedly for everyone present, the Duchess apologized to the girl. She was so distracted that for a moment she forgot that the other children were very different from Kibrin. But there was no point in making excuses now she had to really take care of her. In that case, she needs a nanny. She will take her with her after all. She thought she was lucky that she was not kicked out, but after hearing the apology, a strange feeling appeared. There was no time for that now. The woman standing behind was Elena, the ducal family's personal physician. While she was unconscious, she examined Chiria. It was all great that she was now being looked after by a doctor, but what was wrong with her body? The problem was quite serious. If this continues, she may die this year. Now it was clear that everything was so bad and neglected. In the original work, Chiria was 17 years old when the events took place. She was beautiful, like her older sister Maria, but Chiria never looked happy. How could she have lived so long? In this state, she would not survive the trip to the duchy, so it was time to think about what to do now. Apparently, the woman was still planning to leave her, which was the worst possible plan. The girl tried to convince her that she could endure it, when suddenly she was stopped and asked to remain silent, because the Duchess was thinking. 3 days, during which time Menelik will be able to buy them time. Now Elena is responsible for the restoration of Chiria before the arrival of Viscount Rose. But for a young lady to gain normal weight, she needs to be fed 5 times a day for at least a month. Besides, the temple continues to put pressure on them, and Viscount Rose may not return. A stern look stopped Elena from thinking. These were Madame's problems. She would only think about the young lady. The temple made clear demands, but it was only because of her that the Duchess radically changed her plans. It was ugly. She couldn't cause so much trouble being just a guest. They shouldn't have worried so much. Mariol is already grateful that they are taking her on the trip. It was already time for dinner, and the girl was probably hungry, which is why the woman suggested going to the dining room together. But first, Elena will go to the young gentleman, because she promised to tell him about the lady's condition. Even though she was ignored now, it felt warm inside because he was so worried about her. Before she could fully experience this feeling, the girl was lifted out of bed. It was the Duchess who was remembering the time when Kibrin was 6 years old. He weighed exactly the same as she did now. It was all nice, but Chiria didn't like it at all. She begged them to let her go as much as possible, since she could walk on her own, but the Duchess ignored her again. Before I had time to leave the room, a young gentleman suddenly ran into it, completely frightened. The boy must have been very scared, but she is fine now, but he came to tell her that she cannot go to heaven. This phrase almost sent Mariol to heaven. It was definitely not what she expected to hear. What did Elena manage to tell him about her condition? He was not allowed to know about that. As it turned out, the young duke had already heard their conversation, apparently eavesdropping. After this, when everyone found out about everything, the Duchess carried the girl in her arms. But the thought did not leave her head. How could he have heard after all? Kibrin's room was on the top floor. There was no way he could have heard. Even if he tried to eavesdrop in the corridor, the servants would send him back. But what's more important now is that she won't be able to eat it all, since there are only 3 plates of main dishes. Everyone tried to support her so that she ate as much as she could, except the Duchess. It seemed like she had no intention of stopping them, but simply watching this whole circus. But the food looked too appetizing, so it was impossible not to try it. Everything was very tasty. Elena suggested trying the steak, and Kibrin some kind of meat. As a result, the young lady ate so much that she couldn't eat anything else, not even a bite. She did a great job, and it was possible to gradually increase the portions to help her recover faster. And in addition to food, she needed to take antipyretic and digestive medicine. There will still be many medications to take, but for now I had to be patient. Apparently, if she eats and sleeps well, she will get better, but that's why they treat her as if she has some kind of incurable disease. And now Chiria would like to go for a walk in the garden again. This time the Duchess will go with her, because it has been a long time since she took a walk like this. After a nice walk in the garden, the day quickly came to an end, and it was time to go to bed. But the thoughts never left her head. Her mother watched her from afar the entire time she walked through the garden. After all, she is the mistress of the Duke's house, and she must have a lot of work to do. And yet, Mother is a very good person, someone to look up to. Although the first impression was terrible when she was left in the mansion like an ordinary toy. Come to think of it, maybe she said that because of the temple maids who had been standing behind her all this time. The young Duke agreed with her that he liked his mother too, and of course Lady Sharia too. Although the girl was not at all jealous of the woman, she was interested in whether he liked himself. He needed to think about it some more, but now he could tell that the boy liked his own ears. After all, it was only thanks to them that he heard what his mother and Elena were talking about and learned about her condition. So the young Duke tried to do what he had done when he tried to heal the lady's hands. But there was no effect. Mariol was unable to recover from her illness. But the boy also wants to be useful to her. It was not worth saying that, because he is already very helpful. After all, when she just became ill and lost consciousness, he covered her with a blanket. That was exactly it, so he decided to cover Chiria like that again, even though he had to cover himself too. He was fine. It was enough for him that the young lady was not ill. Indeed, he was very sweet, so she will try to get better as soon as possible. The very next day, a luxurious table with various dishes and treats was laid out in front of the girl. It was amazing, because she had only recently started eating so well and deliciously. But they kept bringing more and more food. The whole table was filled with it, which was only frightening. She woke up and Kibrin was gone, but the table was laden with food Mara didn't know what she would like, so she prepared everything she could. Once she eats everything, she will definitely take the medications that Mrs. Elena prescribed. But she would die from such a quantity of food, of course. She couldn't eat later. She needed to eat at least some of it to recover faster. The maid handed the young lady a huge plate, asking her to eat at least this. Even though it wasn't even a small piece, she asked to try one piece because it was very tasty. It was indeed delicious, but it went on for a long time, and as soon as Chiria had finished the whole plate, there was another one. At this rate, she ate almost everything that was put on the table, and when the last piece remained, she could no longer. It was some kind of torture, albeit delicious, so the lady decided to simply run away from this madness. She ran as fast as she could, even though the maid was catching up with her. But the young lady ran in such a way that she did not look ahead, which is why she collided with the man. The collision was not the softest, causing her to almost fall to the floor, but fortunately they managed to catch her. It was the Duke walking nearby, but the strange thing was that there was no smell of a cigar. Perhaps he had given up smoking. At that moment, the maid managed to catch up with Mariol, who was already being held by a man. She asked him to eat at least a little more, now the picture was clear, and he understood why the lady had run like that. There was nothing left to do but save her from the maddened maid by taking responsibility for her. Now the Duke would look after the disobedient Chiria, and she could return to her business. If she doesn't want to eat, then let her not eat. But the young lady felt sorry. Mara was so worried about her. But if she overeats and suddenly vomits, she will worry even more, which was true. All this time, the man carried the girl in his arm in an unknown direction. It turned out that they were going to Mother's office, which only at first glance looked luxurious. In such an office, one could only sit and sit. But while she was admiring the office, the Duke did not like something, either in her words or in her actions. What she did wrong, it turned out. He did not understand why Winter was the mother, and he, just the Duke. It was all over such a trifle that the young lady was unable to answer him at once. In that case, it was the Duchess's office, but she couldn't get out of it by simply deciding to address it differently. You should have addressed him not as Duke, but by something else. It began with P. This is a word that can be used to describe someone like him without paying attention to his status. It seemed that Sharia understood what he had been trying to convey to her all this time when he called him an ancestor. But it was even worse than the official appeal that only finished him off. She may not know it, but the man was 3 years younger than Winter, which wasn't even noticeable. The Duke carried the young lady deeper into the study, where she saw something through one of the windows. There was a young Duke sitting on the street, obviously doing something there. Mariol wanted to go to him as quickly as possible, having first asked the man if it was possible. To which he only asked if he was afraid of Kibrin, but why should she be afraid of him? He, like all children, was an ordinary child, just with a peculiarity, but these words already made him happy. The Duke immediately released the lady to the boy, asking her to walk carefully and not like last time. Without thinking, the girl immediately ran to meet Kibrin, but before leaving she turned back. The man still stood and looked after her, but what had he just tried to tell her? Perhaps he wanted her to call him Dad, but you'll never know. Of course, that wasn't accurate, so I'll have to try calling it that next time. Just a few minutes later, Mariol was already at the doors leading to the street. As soon as she came out, the lady should have seen the young Duke almost immediately. But he was not there. When suddenly a voice was heard that someone needed to leave, they would not see each other for some time. It was Kibrin, but whoever he was talking to, having decided to eavesdrop, she hid behind the nearest tree. He said that he was a good guy for being able to escape, and now he didn't need to bring food. By the way, she never asked what he ate while he was in the annex before her arrival. Before she could find out more, the young Duke himself noticed her and managed to finish speaking. As soon as she could forget that he had good hearing, coming closer, she asked who he was with. It was some kind of animal that managed to leave because it was very shy around strangers. Isn't he sad? Because by leaving for the duchy, he will part with him and will hardly see him again. Everything was fine. There were also many different friends in the garden and in the forest of the duchy. True, now the boy will not be able to go into the forest. He cannot wander anywhere. There were scary people everywhere. But now everything was fine, because he had both his mother and Lady Sharia, who would always be there. But if he suddenly feels bad about it later, he will definitely need to talk about it. The lady would take him anywhere. It could be absolutely any place. Kibrin was always interested from the moment she came to him. What kind of family does Lady Sharia have? He wanted to meet her, which would be very difficult. It's all because of the Count's couple, who only think about how to use their own child. And her own sister, who in the original story already bore the title of villain. The county of Mariol was a gathering place of people with disgusting characters. She didn't even think about it because her greatest weakness was her own family. Even if she strengthens her position, they will probably talk all sorts of nonsense that now she will have to repay them for raising her. How could I explain all this to Carton now so that he wouldn't get sad? But he immediately understood that it was still impossible. I had to tell the truth that she hates her family and that they have a bad relationship. In fact, they sold her to the duchy. Sharia is not a saint like her sister, and you can't make money from her. Is it possible to tell him about this? What could the girl possibly tell him? But everything was not so. The thing is that then, before they could finish speaking, a maid came running to them. Apparently, all this time she was looking for the young lady who was simply sitting on the street. The young Duke, seeing that they had come for her, offered to help her get up, which of course the little girl couldn't refuse. For his age, Nectarian lifted her very high above himself. It was something shocking, because how could he lift her so high? Luckily, he didn't hold her on his sleeve for long, releasing her to the ground moments later. But what kind of power was this? Where did the child get it from? That's what made me think. By this time, Mara had managed to come up, and taking the mistress's hands, she asked to forgive her. She felt bad for her, she just wanted her to get better soon. But eating a lot won't improve her health, and this won't happen again. The angel asks for forgiveness from such a pathetic girl like her. Mara is not guilty of anything before her. She was only grateful for all the maid's care, so she should stop talking like that. These words touched the woman deeply, and she was also grateful to the young lady. In that case, it was time to return to the mansion. She needed to show her something. Without having time to say goodbye to Kibrin, they went into the mansion to look at what Mara wanted to show. It was a luxurious and spacious room, shining with cleanliness and sunshine. Now this was her promised room of her own, which the maid had spoken of. Of course, Cheria really liked this room, which was impossible to describe in words. After all, this wasn't an attic, there were no cleaning supplies or cobwebs here. And the most remarkable thing is that there were no bugs or cockroaches in this room. All this should not be in the room. How terribly the County of Mariol treated such a sweet young lady. Only later did the girl realize that she shouldn't have told Mara such things. Everything was fine. The county wasn't that bad either, but now she would spend her best days in the duchy. For this, the maid will protect her with all her might. Such things are simply unforgivable. But now everything is fine. She did well to endure everything so courageously. Everything that happened to her seemed so strange, because she only ended up in Cheria's body. All those horrors happened to the real Cheria before her reincarnation. But then why were her tears flowing, as if all this had happened to her? As if she were the real Cheria, all this could not be explained in any way. She could only thank everyone for this until the night fell. The lady did not understand what kind of feeling it was. Cheria's past seems to be hers. The same thing happened with the girl's thoughts. Was she gradually merging with her? If you think about it, she doesn't even remember what she looked like before the move, but the plot of the original remains in her memory. It all seemed too strange, so for now it was necessary to focus on the present. The young lady approached the suitcase with her things from the Count's house. After turning it over completely and taking out all the clothes, a gold coin fell out. 1 gold coin, which she barely managed to drag out of the Count's house. With this, she will now be able to buy at least some kind of gift her father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Kibrin were so kind to her. She wanted to thank them somehow. Considering that she was a time traveler, she would like to give them something grandiose. For example, information about investments that will take off in a few years, or about a family that is planning a rebellion. But if a child says something like that, no one will believe it, so she will simply prepare something appropriate for her age. As soon as the next day arrived, Mariol immediately went to the Duchess. She asked that she wanted to go out for a while, in such and such a state, but she took her medicine yesterday and slept well, so now she is completely fine. Although it was clear from her appearance that she still hadn't recovered, it was worth thinking about. And yet, unable to resist, the woman allowed him to assign her a night, but she would only have an hour. That was enough. All that was left was to get ready for the trip to the city. As soon as the young lady was completely collected, she went outside. The sun was already high above, so it illuminated everything it could. On the street, a prepared carriage with a knight, as the Duchess had promised, was already waiting for her. The man was dressed in a luxurious white robe with black patterns and gold elements. They had been driving for quite a long time, but the city was visible in the distance. All this time, the girl sat in the carriage and looked at the knight who was sitting in front. Even at their first meeting, she felt that he was very courageous. It seems that in the novel, his name was Caesar. It doesn't look like he holds a high position, and why would they assign such a knight to her? It all seemed strange, but there was no point in thinking about it now. Now she was wondering what Kibrin was doing now. It would be good if they went together. By this time, they had already entered the city, where the young lady would soon be walking. As soon as they arrived in the city and got out of the carriage, there were people everywhere. The street was busy. Everywhere you looked, people were buying and selling something. It was surprising, because Cheria hadn't seen such a large number of different people for a long time. Everything around was so interesting and diverse, something you rarely see when you don't go anywhere. And when she was still very little, it was to this place that Cheria came. It was the same place, and the same old lady was selling it then, just like now. And she sold those very bracelets that attracted people with their beauty. The girl definitely wanted that bracelet, and she couldn't resist going over to buy it right away. But this bracelet came in a pair with another, exactly the same bracelet, in a different color scheme. They must be bought together for something good to happen. How can you deceive a child like that? But in any case, she wanted to buy this bracelet. There should definitely be enough money for this. She held out her gold coin, asking to give her 2 at once. The old woman was very surprised by such payment apparently. 1 gold coin was worth a lot. While the woman was collecting the change she was supposed to give, the lady was trying on the bracelet on her hand. He looked great from every angle, which was exactly what she wanted. In the past, Mariol really wanted this bracelet, but did not dare to ask to buy it. But all these were just memories of the past, Sharia, so why is she so happy? Just like yesterday, it looks like it really does blend in with the original Sharia. Besides this, she was wondering whether her grandmother had made these bracelets herself. As it turned out, her eyesight was already poor, and it was the work of her granddaughter. Not forgetting about the change, the woman handed her a huge and heavy bag of coins, which she gave to the knight. A gift for her father-in-law and mother-in-law should be luxurious. She is sure that more expensive things were sold on the main street. Without delay, the young lady and the knight went there to find the gift. As they walked along the main street, it was difficult to notice that things were actually better here than there. Besides this, there were also quite a lot of aristocrats, so what could one choose from? But as they walked, the people around them kept talking about them, because the knight's armor had the symbol of the duchy on it. Apparently, no one liked their presence. Everyone who passed by paid attention to them. They recognized it immediately, probably because it was a street frequented by aristocrats. And then, having walked just a little bit, my eye fell on a cute toy, a teddy bear. Kibrin should definitely like her. Together they would look even cuter. But as soon as they approached the store that sold toys, she was told in a panic that they were closing. It all looked strange, because it was still daytime outside, but no one was going to let her in. This treatment of them, just because they were from a ducal family, was terrible. Wherever the girl looked, in the direction of the aristocrats, everyone was frightened by her gaze. Even those people who were far behind trembled at the mere sight of him. After many glances, it became clear that the Nectarian Duchy were unwanted guests. In that case, Mariol won't even be able to buy a gift when everyone is afraid of her. Unfortunately, nothing can be done about this. They will have to return. This treatment was unfair, because in the end, she never bought anything on the high street. But there is no need to despair. It was worth looking in other places. Maybe she could find something worthwhile. There was a bakery right in front of them, where people were going in crowds. This was just what I needed. I needed to at least buy something to eat. The bakery was very busy, so they were unlikely to choose their customers. And the desserts in the duchy are, of course, delicious, but they are too healthy and not very sweet, and there is not enough cream. As a result, Sharia chose a cake in the shape of a cute bear that looked so much like Kibrin. She bought a gift for the young duke. Perhaps she could find a gift for her father-in-law and mother-in-law here. But it was also worth keeping an eye on the time. When I asked the knight what time it was, it turned out that it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The time the Duchess had allotted for her walk was no longer available. It was time to return. After a while, they reached the carriage, heading back, which was terrible. After all, the girl never bought gifts for her father-in-law and mother-in-law, not even thinking that buying gifts is so difficult. Besides, she couldn't guarantee that next time everything would be different. But even if you think about it, if she buys something expensive for her father-in-law and mother-in-law, it will all look the same. The Duchy of Nectarian was particularly renowned for its wealth. It was worth thinking about now. After all, since it's going to be a gift, it's better to give something with meaning and soul. It was worth asking the man if he thought his mother and the Duke would like it, if she gave them something made with her own hands. This was a question worth pondering, because in essence, they had everything they could possibly want. And yet, they should have liked such a gift with all their hearts. Having received a positive response, the young lady set to work. It was a little awkward to do in the carriage, but she eventually got it done. And so, at last, they arrived at the duchy, where the young lady was already awaited. The first thing she decided to do was to come to the young duke, who had been busy all this time. Kibrin was glad that Sharia had finally arrived, especially since he saw her for the first time that day. Besides this, he managed to hear from someone that the girl went outside with the guard. That's exactly how it was, and all for the sake of buying something interesting. The lady had a bag with her the whole time, from which she took out a box containing a cute bun in the shape of a bear. This bread was very cute and looked like the young Duke, that's why she bought it. It was a little unusual because she thought it was cute that it looked like a boy. Everything was exactly as he said, because in the eyes of Lady Sharia, he did not seem like some kind of monster, but on the contrary. And this bear in the box is just as cute as Kibrin. I just wanted to eat it. I just had to try it quickly. I wanted to try it as soon as possible because the bun looked very appetizing. But as soon as the first piece was taken, bright red filling started to flow out of the bear, making it look creepy. No one expected this, especially the girl, since it was she who bought the bun as a gift for the young Duke. It was so unexpected that it immediately made me hungry, which was not the case at all. The whole picture looked like a horror movie. But after some time, the whole bun was eaten, leaving only a red spot of filling. It's good that at least it was delicious. Was that store really so popular because of its unusual concept? This bear seemed to be saying that he wanted to show him this rotten world, but now was not the time for it. The young lady had another gift for Kibrin, which she managed to prepare in the carriage. Sharia, unlike her sister, was unable to attend classes or meet other young ladies. She spent all her time only in the attic. At that time, knotting was her only hobby. It was good that the girl managed to finish at least one in the carriage, and now she can give something made with her own hands. Even though this little thing was something ordinary and cheap, next time she would definitely buy him something worthwhile. But even such a gift, made with his own hands, was excellent, and the boy liked everything. He promised that he would keep it until his death. Even after death, he reacted very violently. After all, the young Duke could wear it only a couple of times and throw it away, and Mariol wouldn't be offended in the least. Although the Duke said exactly the same thing, and then sulked for a long time because he was upset, which means he is touchy and takes a long time to recover. This was something to remember, and while the lady had not forgotten, she had not yet finished the gifts for her mother and the Duke. She could only hope that they wouldn't be offended if she gave them the gifts a little later than planned. After meeting with Kibrin, the lady went to see her mother, although she was a little late. Although all this was because she needed to meet the young Duke and give him something. But in fact, she wanted to give her mother a gift, but she couldn't find anything suitable. It was surprising that Sharia wanted to give her a gift, but today she could only buy bracelets. One of which was already on the young lady, but later she would definitely buy her something much better. But everything was fine. The Duchess liked such a gift, even though it was so simple. It's certainly beautiful, but you can tell it's cheap, even though it's probably better than what she made herself. As soon as the woman put on the bracelet that Sharia had bought, it immediately began to sparkle on her. It was just a very ordinary and cheap beaded bracelet, but on my mother it looks like a jewel. It was as if they were walking together, and picking it out for the woman there was no point in exaggerating, because these were the same beads, just a different color. Unfortunately, flattery did not work on the Duchess at all, and you will not hear any praise from her. While Mariol was talking with her mother, the Duke approached them, having overheard some conversation. Upon seeing the young lady, the first question was what she was doing there. She went outside and bought gifts. As soon as the man heard about the gifts, he immediately became cheerful, expecting his own gift from the girl. She's finished, because her father was a terrible miser and also vindictive, although the Duke never said so. But Sharia still had to tell him that his gift was not ready yet. The words that there was no gift for the man only angered him, because it was not what he expected. The bracelet for the Duke is still in the making, so she will definitely give it to him tomorrow. It was the only way to somehow calm him down, but now he will wait until tomorrow. Perhaps it was impossible to encourage him anymore, because suddenly he would become even more angry. But it seemed like Rick really liked her. Rick was Menric's pet name that Winter calls him. Apparently, she decided this because of his reaction. There was no need to worry so much. Rick would be happy with everything that Mariol gave him. Besides, she would hardly be able to buy anything better than what they already had, which was true. And since Mother says so, it was worth trying on a gift for the Duke and making him happy. The next day, everything was ready. Sharia managed to prepare the long-awaited gift. The young lady worked hard on it all night, and one can only wonder if he will like it. But it looked good for a little girl. All that was left was to hand it over, hoping that her mother was right. As soon as Sharia knocked on the door, the Duke opened the door for her almost immediately, as if he had been waiting for her. He didn't understand what she was doing here. Perhaps something had happened, even though it was almost time for breakfast. The young lady was here to present the gift in her hands that she had spoken about yesterday. The man looked at the braided knot as he heard the girl call him daddy for the first time. There was nothing left to do but accept this homemade gift, which looked very beautiful. In fact, the Duke didn't even think that she would actually prepare any kind of gift for him. But still, it felt good to know that he had not been forgotten. It was impossible to hide the smile from his face as he thanked the young lady with all his heart. It was like a fairy tale, because she really didn't think that he would like such a simple gift. But she was finally thanked for something that made her feel good, and all her worries faded into the background. After this, the day passed as usual for the young lady, after which night came and it was time to go to bed. But there was no sleep in either eye, even though it was already late. There was nothing to be done. It was simply impossible to force myself to go to bed. It was worth taking a little walk. Perhaps it was because she would finally be leaving for the duchy tomorrow that she was so worried and anxious. Besides this, her chest was hurting badly, but she was glad that she had gained at least a little weight, although the lady did not understand whether Elena had praised her or insulted her. After all, the woman congratulated her on the fact that it seemed she had managed to recover and was now the size of a cat's booger. And while the girl was walking along the corridors, trying to calm down a little before tomorrow, she saw the Duchess. The woman stood silently on the street, and the moonbeams gave her only mystery and beauty. But what was Mother doing at such a late hour alone, and on the street at that? The only way to find out was to go up to her and ask her why she wasn't sleeping, even though Winter wanted to ask the same thing. As it turned out, neither of them could fall asleep at that hour until Chiria noticed something shiny in her hand. This was the source of her pain. It was the reason her chest hurt from the beginning. It seemed to be filled with divine power. But all this was a trifle, considering that Kibrin would once again be imprisoned in the duchy, just like before. The Duchess once asked him what he wanted, and he replied that he wanted exactly this for himself. The duchy was just another palace, but was the woman sure she wanted to leave without seeing the saint? After all, if he meets the saint, perhaps the young duke will get better and will not have to be kept in the duchy. Besides, she was her younger sister. The Duchess could at least try to take advantage of that. But when she took Chiria away, Count Mariol told her that she had grabbed the saint by the lapels and attacked her. Although it was simply self-defense, the Duchess would be lying if she said she had not had such thoughts. At the very beginning, as soon as she took the girl in, she had such terrible thoughts. But in the end, she made a decision that even if the young lady was a saintly sister, she did not want to use it for her own purposes. Then they will be no different from Count Mariol, who simply sold his daughter. That is why the woman thought of bringing the saint here by force, but Kibrin said that it was useless. He said that he now understood that a monster can only be healed by another monster of the same kind. As she spoke, the girl recalled how the young duke had asked her if she was a monster since she got along so well with him. It couldn't be that way, because Chiria automatically answered that it was possible. But did he really think that? Although the Duchess did not understand at all why her son said this and what it could mean. In that case, the little thing she had in her hand all this time was no longer of any use. Perhaps it would be better to collect monsters than to indulge these spoiled temple people. Whether it was sealing magic or something else, once what was on Kibrin's body disappeared, it would wipe those Templars off the face of the earth. Then Chiria will no longer be scolded for attacking the saint like a madwoman. From these words, the young lady's heart ached. These words touched her very deeply. After all, the only people who cared so much about the world outside of this world were the people from the duchy. But in the original story, all these good people in the duchy died at the hands of the maddened Kibrin. The Duchess thought she would be delighted by this good news, but she looked unwell. It's possible that the girl's temperature has risen again, which would be very bad in their situation. She was worried about Chiria. Her mother was the true mistress of the ducal house. Despite being from a fallen royal family, the Duchess must have lived a hard life with Kibrin, who was considered a monster. She is a strong person who is not afraid to show kindness. The girl promised that she would also try her best for the ducal house because they took her in. After all, she would never allow such a mother to be killed, especially by the maddened Kibrin. It was so unexpected to hear this, because the woman thought that she would ask to be sent to another family. But this was not at all the case. The girl did not want to go anywhere, especially to another family. After all, she liked this family much more than some other strange family. The young lady liked her mother very much. She had never seen anyone more beautiful than her in her life. She spoke exactly like Rick, which was quite funny and cute at the same time. When they went to the duchy, she asked that they continue to entertain her as they did now. And so the next day arrived, the day when it was time to leave for the duchy. Everyone in the mansion was getting ready and hurrying, because it was almost time to leave. And one of the maids noticed that the young duke was nothing but skin and bones. The girl saw this maid for the first time, which was somehow unusual, because she already knew almost everyone. It was Viscountess Rose. She was the young gentleman's wet nurse before he went to a separate palace. She heard that she immediately rushed here as soon as she learned that the young master had left the private palace. Viscountess Rose is so fragile, it must have been very difficult to overcome such a long journey alone, without an escort. But how could someone like her be a fragile woman when she looked like a man? It could not be that this strange-looking woman was what she was imagined to be. However, one should not give in to prejudices and judge people by their appearance. But no matter how you look at it, she is not a fragile woman, so why did they speak about her like that? Besides that, she looked very threatening, as if she was unhappy with Cheria's presence. Suddenly, she approached Elena. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. After all, this was her second home. All this time, Mariole was hiding behind the maid's back, after which she put her forward. She should have said hello because Rose would now take care of her too, apparently. In Elena's eyes, she looked different. But something was wrong about her, even though the woman greeted her as if she was glad to see her. It all seemed strange because in the original story there was no such person at all. And her threatening look indicated that the Viscountess wanted to get rid of the young lady. Viscountess Rose was delighted to meet her, having heard enough about the young lady to hope to get along. There was no such character in the original. Such an attractive beauty cannot be just a secondary character. And judging by how the color of her eyes changed to red, she is definitely not an ordinary person, maybe not a person at all. Although, considering that there is a saint in this world, there is nothing surprising. Absolutely everything was possible. While Mariole was pondering this, Elena asked to take care of the young lady on the road. Of course, the woman could not refuse this, but the question remained unanswered. Why did she see her differently? This definitely wouldn't work. I had to stay away from her. If Cheria was nearby, she would definitely reveal her suspicions. So she immediately decided to run away, saying that she would go to her room for a while. The little girl's behavior suited the Viscountess, as she was afraid of her, which was part of the plan. But fortunately for Mariole, no one stopped her and she was able to run to her room to rest a bit. When they arrive at the duchy, Rose will most likely not leave her side. She is not some stranger, but a nurse who is obliged to look after Kibrin. All that remains is to come up with a plan. At this time, while the young lady was thinking about how to avoid the woman, someone came up to her from behind and hit her on the head with something. She was so frightened that she couldn't help but scream, but it was only the Duke. But what was the man doing here? As it turned out, he came in to give something, and as Elena said, she was in the room. That something turned out to be a gift, namely a beautiful box with gold patterns on it. The girl could consider it a return gift for the one she gave him the other day. The gift was wonderful and very beautiful, but the question remained, where was the key to it? As the Duke was told, the key would only be ready next year. It was as if he was mocking her. There was no point in getting angry with him now. The main thing was to keep a straight face, so the lady would look forward to next year. The Duke would accept her gratitude, although it was clear from her face that she wanted to throw it away on the way. Of course not, and yet the father-in-law was too perceptive and understood everything at first glance. But besides the gift, the man wanted to say that if she felt ill on the way to the duchy, she should tell her right away. When asked if the journey would be long, he replied that they would travel by carriage to the middle of the way, and then they will use teleportation. But if a person has a weak body, like hers, the teleportation can make her very dizzy. The Duke had said this beforehand just in case, worrying about Cheria, but she was already much better. The girl could probably handle some kind of teleportation easily, which was clearly a bold statement. But when the moment came for them to leave, everything turned out completely differently than Mariol thought. She was still too weak for such a move, so much so that she developed a fever. Although the lady tried to convince Elena that everything was fine and that she was just riding in a carriage for such a long time for the first time and was nervous. Her body was telling a completely different story. She felt bad, and if only that were the case. But Viscountess Rose has not taken her eyes off the young lady from the very beginning of the trip. There was a terrifying energy emanating from her, and her smile seemed to mock her. This attitude towards himself really irritated Chiria, which only made things worse. She had just smirked to lighten the mood. Elena suggested going outside for a bit to get some air. Madame ordered that the carriage be stopped immediately if the young lady or the young gentleman felt even the slightest bit unwell. As expected, the mother-in-law is the best, and this was just in time, in which case she will go with Kibrin. Having suggested that the boy go outside and get some fresh air, he immediately agreed. But besides wanting to get away from the trip a little, Mariol wanted to ask something. It was about Viscountess Rose, whether he also sees a blonde muscle man in this man. And besides this, did the young duke see how the color of her eyes changed dramatically? And why does she always look only at her? Unfortunately, it was impossible to say that. So the girl asked what kind of person she was, the young master's wet nurse. According to Kibrin, it turned out that this girl often cries, behaving like a fragile girl. Besides this, she couldn't do anything on her own, even though she looked like a walking mountain of muscles in the eyes of the lady. That's why the boy felt sorry for her and was always there for her. But what did that even mean? Does Kibrin also see this seemingly obvious man as a fragile woman? The lady felt like she could knock down a tiger with one hand, and Nectarian noticed that she apparently didn't like Rose. But most likely, it was she who didn't like her. They just weren't used to each other yet, but Chiria would try to get along with her. The young duke really hoped for this, because the three of them would be more fun, but she couldn't promise that. And so, after some time, the carriage arrived at the duchy, where all the things were already being actively sorted out. It wasn't the best trip. The lady was dizzy and nauseous, which is what Dad mentioned. While the girl was trying to recover from this trip, someone approached her. Unfortunately, it turned out to be Viscountess Rose, clearly not the person one wanted to see. She noticed that this was the first time she had teleported, and she shouldn't walk until the dizziness passed. Otherwise, she might fall and get hurt, which wouldn't be the best outcome. But why is she suddenly so kind? The woman advised her not to overexert herself for a while, as if she was worried about her. This behavior seemed to be just for show, so that no one would think that Rose was up to something. After all, before saying something to Chiria, she looked around. Once the Viscountess was sure there was no one around, she whispered quietly in his ear that as soon as she got what she needed, she had to get out of the Duke's house. The woman had no intention of caring for any other child except Kibrin. Her look and manner of speech, and especially the words she uttered, left Mariol stupefied. That same day, the young lady took to her bed feeling unwell after the trip. She found it difficult to endure such long and difficult journeys, considering that she had not felt completely well up to that point. But if Viscountess Rose hadn't been there then, it would have been better. She was already feeling bad, and then she had to hear such words. It was good that she didn't throw up right there, and in the meantime, all this time, the young duke looked after the lady. He was very worried about her, but now she is better than she was. Probably she felt so bad because she teleported for the first time. The boy probably felt dizzy like that the first time he teleported. Of course, he replied that it was the same, although he didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. If she hadn't felt so bad, the lady would have immediately looked around the Duke's mansion. The ducal mansion was called the Crescent Castle, and the forest surrounding the duchy was the Full Moon Forest. The Full Moon Forest was famous for being home to all sorts of monsters, so it is said that squads were often formed there to destroy them and collect magic stones. Besides that, Mother said something like that, mentioning that she was collecting monsters for Kibrin. But does the young duke remember what she told him before? That the lady is also a monster. Luckily, he will keep it a secret and won't tell anyone. Chiria is not like him. She can't be locked up. The girl wanted to say that she wasn't really a monster, but after he said it, she just can't tell him the truth, that she wasn't really who he thought she was. Well, now the lady will try to become the monster that Kibrin imagines. And as it turned out, in fact, this is what his former wet nurse said, that a monster can only be healed by another monster. That's where this phrase comes from. He didn't understand it then, but now it seems the boy realizes the meaning of this phrase. Now everything fell into place as the young lady had thought. Something was wrong with Viscountess Rose. A lot of time has passed since then, and there was enough time to think about everything. By this time, it was lunchtime, and this time the girl had eaten much more than when she was in the mansion. But when she eats all this, she will become healthy. She wanted to quickly explore the duchy. And I also wish her a quick recovery so she can cope with whatever Rose does later. In addition, Dr. Elena said that starting today it would be beneficial for her to walk a little. So the maid suggested that after the meal they take a leisurely stroll around the castle with Viscountess Rose. This was the worst possible decision. I had to think of something urgently to avoid going with her. After all, the lady is not ready to meet her yet, so she needs to meet her mother after the meal. The maid did not understand at all what she was talking about, to which the lady replied that she had told her to come immediately after eating. Although Madame did not say to bring the young Madame with you, of course, this is just a made-up excuse. But this was the only solution in order to avoid meeting the Viscountess for as long as possible. So, after all the food had been eaten, she immediately went to the Duchess's office. She was late, even though she didn't say she would come, but that doesn't matter now. The main thing is that she came. The situation was not the most pleasant, so the girl decided not to make it worse and sat down next to him. The woman reported that Kibrin would now undergo training intended for heirs. So for some time he will not go outside. His Majesty was asked to at least pretend. It's as if the temple is looking after the boy, but why is she telling her all this now? What can you do due to the temple's negligence? A fire broke out in the place where she was with Kibrin. The source was a lady, but fortunately the fire was successfully extinguished, and she brought the boy out. But the Duchess was going to take them both right there, but fortunately, a miracle happened, nothing less. Mother already knew that she had started the fire on purpose, and maybe Mother needed a reason. If it had not been her, but someone else who had pushed her, if she had taken even one step forward, the Duchess would not have turned away from Kibrin in the novel as she does now. She knows the truth perfectly well, but she covers for Cheria. Thanks to His Majesty's permission, everything was quickly resolved. At that moment, the woman took out the documents that had been hidden in her desk all this time. This document was the marriage of Cheria Estala Nectarian and Sabrin Vasilios Nectarian. It was shocking news, but did she intend to remain a young lady all her life? Now she is not a young lady from the Count's house, but Kibrin's wife, a duchess. The paperwork is complete, but the wedding can only take place after the couple reaches adulthood. Marriage of underage aristocrats is only possible in the form of an engagement with a minimal budget, and this is unacceptable. News after news only shocked and at the same time delighted the girl more and more. After all, she was now officially a member of the ducal family. But everything couldn't be so simple and joyful. There was definitely something else here. Perhaps it was because of Count Mariol. The reason why the Duchess changed her surname so hastily. He didn't want the surname of the Count's house to be added to her name. Therefore, when the girl was sold to the palace prison, he probably set the condition that she change her surname as soon as possible. Everything was exactly as the young lady said. It couldn't have been any other way. But everything turned out to be completely different from what Cheria had imagined. Her judgments were incorrect. The reason the woman changed her last name so quickly was because she simply wanted to. All this was only her decision and will. No Count Mariol had anything to do with it. These words quickly brought the young Duchess to her senses. She was happy to hear this. Even though she understood that she was behaving like Kibrin did when he lied for the good, she also looked away. This only made her happy, even though the woman tried to convince her that everything she said was true. In that case, since all the news had been announced, the Duchess had things to do. While the girl could still go to Viscountess Rose, she was again sent to this wet nurse. Cheria came to her to avoid meeting Viscountess Rose, but she is driven to meet her again. There was nothing left to do but ask to go with Mother, promising to sit quietly. Besides, there was still so much that was unfamiliar in the duchy. The lady wanted to meet her when she got better. Who knows what she might do? Fortunately, the Duchess agreed to take her with her, since it would be calmer nearby, and at the same time, it would do her good. In that case, we can go, but on the condition that the girl sits quietly. This was good news. Recently, monster attacks have become more frequent, and it was necessary to urgently send reinforcements. But it would be even better for the Duke to intervene himself, since there are many monsters with abilities among them. This is a good chance to get a lot of red magic stones. They are much more valuable than the blue magic stones created by mages, and in the future they can be used. It was a good way to earn money, and the next report was about the harvest. It was good to be able to learn about the affairs of the duchy, but Sharia was constantly overcome with sleep. Perhaps it was the consequences of teleportation. The girl, unable to bear it, fell asleep right on the table. The Duchess immediately noticed that she had fallen asleep next to her and decided to cover her with her cloak. After some time, the young Duchess opened her eyes. She was sleeping very soundly. Having recovered a little and raised his head, it was already quite quiet in the office. And next to her, the Duchess was no longer sitting. In her place was the Duke, who was watching the lady. But what is he doing here? It wasn't him at all who was nearby. The man tried to be quiet, but it seems he woke her up. In addition, it was only after some time that Sharia noticed that all this time she had been wearing the Duchess's cape. Her things emanated a very pleasant smell, so much so that one could not enjoy it to one's fill. Mother was the best, since she took such good care of her while she slept soundly. While the lady was rejoicing at this, the Duke was not empty-handed. He had a gift for Sharia. It was a red bow on the headband that emphasized the sweet face of the young Duchess. As it turned out, the man was out for a walk and decided to buy a gift while his mother was working all the time. The girl was also interested in whether he had been to any of the attractions. In that case, wouldn't she like to take a look at the castle? There was something to see here, unlike the mansion. Of course she would like to, but is it really possible for her to walk alone without Viscountess Rose? But why not? Immediately after these words, the Duke began to draw on paper for the girl. The result was a map of the Duke's mansion. With a map like this, she wouldn't get lost so easily. It had pictures of the main rooms, such as the room where Kibrin mostly works. And down the corridor there was a storage area for artifacts, which was strange to note. There was an exhibition hall nearby that she would probably like. It was full of expensive things. The young Duchess showed so clearly that she loved money that the man decided to draw this place too. With the map drawn and explained, the girl decided to go exploring. The girl walked for a long time along the corridors of the mansion with the map she had just drawn. First, she had to go to where Kibrin was studying, using the paper as a guide. Typically in such romantic fantasies, the home tutor who bullies the main character is a secondary character. If this is the case, she will immediately tell everything to her mother, not allowing such individuals to harm anyone else. As soon as the girl approached the door, she heard a conversation that someone wanted to meet and thank her. Nina recovered after using the herbs the young gentleman told her about, but his friend said that he would catch a rarer animal than Nina and bring it back. It's not that Nina was caught, rather she came herself. Who was they talking about all this time? Was it a person or an animal? Before I could understand the conversation or hear more, the door swung open, revealing Kibrin. All this time, Sharia forgot that the young Duke had good hearing and could easily hear everything. Taken by surprise, the lady tried to explain that she had not eavesdropped with malicious intent. While the boy was standing in the doorway, the same second man who had spoken to him approached them. As expected, the lady was nice, and the man was glad to meet the young Duchess. He introduced himself as Baron Daniel Dawson, the young master's history teacher. The man looked very kind, and it didn't look like he was mocking the boy in any way. But there were some things about him that seemed strange, one of which was his clothes. His jacket, trousers, and boots, all his things were shabby, although he was a baron and not a commoner. Wasn't he the one who mocked, but on the contrary, he himself was beaten for every little thing, which was even worse. But for now, it was impossible to draw any conclusions about what was happening between them, since he didn't look like the Baron at all. Perhaps the problem with his appearance was that he was gambling, which caused him to be in debt. While the young lady was talking with the Baron and thinking everything over, Viscountess Rose approached her from behind. She was definitely not happy with Charia's presence in this house, which only irritated her. The woman gently pushed her aside, walking into the room and sitting down at the table. But all this time her gaze was directed only at the young Duchess, angry and terrible. How could she possibly know that the lady was at Kibrin's at that moment? Since Viscountess Rose had arrived, the Baron decided to step away, leaving them alone. It was an honor for the man to meet the young Duchess today, but for now, he had to leave. With these words he left the room. Since there was still time until the next lesson, the boy wanted to be with them. Realizing that Sharia had probably heard some part of their conversation, he explained that Nina was a large leopard. The Baron said that she had recovered because she had been dying, but fortunately she had a strong will to live. The young gentleman also wanted Nina to get better soon, and then the Baron came with good news. But unfortunately, he can't go outside, which was sad because he won't be able to see her. How could the girl forget about this? Because Kibrin said that he would be locked up in the duchy. In the mansion, he talked to animals as if they were friends, probably including Nina at one time. In that case, the only way to cheer him up was to offer to go instead of him. Sharia will go and convey to Nina the greetings of the young Duke, which was a joy to hear. In that case, Viscountess Rose could not leave her alone, so she volunteered to go with her. When she said that she would go for a walk with Kibrin, she also wanted to. It seems that the woman is overwhelmed with jealousy. It's as if she can't stand the fact that she will have to win the young master's favor. While the girl was thinking about this, Kibrin took out a bag of cookies and immediately offered them to her. Of course, she couldn't refuse this and immediately took the offered cookie. But will the Viscountess really go with them? In any case, there will be security, so she won't be able to do anything. Rose was looking at her so intently that perhaps she wanted to tell her something. Does she want to do this and tell him to clean up right in front of Kibrin, which will only ruin her relationship with him? Apparently, the woman still wanted to say something, because with a menacing look, she decided to get up from the table. Such abrupt movements really scared the girl, because she didn't expect her to do that. But luckily for everyone, she simply stood up to leave the room, leaving them alone. It was surprising, but in that case, why did Viscountess Rose come? Probably to visit Kibrin. Besides this, winter comes faster in the duchy than in the capital. Because of this, the young Duke was very cold, which was not surprising. He was a snake. That's exactly how it was. Because of this question, he was very embarrassed, because he told about his weakness. Besides this, when he was cold, he was constantly overcome with sleepiness. In this, he was also similar to a snake. But so what if he looked like a snake? If the boy is a snake, then he is the cutest snake in the world. Chiraya didn't care at all what the boy looked like, because the main thing was that they were together. Moreover, she also considered herself quite cute for a monster, even though she is not one. But since there is a young duke, she is happy to settle for second place. The atmosphere between them immediately improved, as if they understood each other from the first word. The girl was also interested in how his recent lessons with the Viscount had gone. Everything was quite good. In that case, she wanted to look at the notebook, which was completely covered in writing. What was in the notebook greatly amazed the young Duchess. Everything looked too perfect. Especially for this, she took out a piece of paper with a drawn map that was lying in her pocket. All this was done in order to compare Kibrin's handwriting and Manrik's handwriting. Fortunately, Kibrin's handwriting was similar to his mother's, which was a good thing. But it seems that in one of the places that was drawn by the Duke, the purpose has changed. As it turned out, this place used to be full of stone slabs with incomprehensible inscriptions. They said they were valuable, but he wasn't interested. They didn't seem like anything surprising. Since they are so valuable that even the young Duke knows about them, it was worth going and looking at them. By this time, Kibrin's next lesson should have already started, in which case the lady would go. In any case, now she had new things to do, namely further exploration of the mansion. According to the map, the place she was looking for was located deep below, further down the stairs. As Sharia walked down it, she noticed that there was no one there, even the security was so weak. In that case, you could calmly look around, because this place is filled with interesting things. One of these things was the stone tablets, apparently the very ones the young gentleman spoke of. The girl didn't expect to be able to see them so quickly after that conversation about them. One of them said that someone loves glasses, beautiful hands, cries when they are alone, hates hard clothes, and disorder. Perhaps it was some kind of code, because it can't be that it simply says that someone hates lies and disorder. Now she understands why Kibrin said he wasn't interested, because he was. But why would anyone write something like this down in notebooks or on stone slabs? It all looked strange. While the lady was examining the stone slabs, the magician, Emil Silentium, approached her. He has sworn to serve the ducal house his entire life and is responsible for this repository of artifacts. Cheria thought that he looked like someone, but unfortunately she couldn't remember who. She could have called the man simply Emil, but did they find anything interesting in this place? All that caught the girl's attention were the stone slabs that lay near the table like trash. But even if she looks, she still won't understand anything. No one can decipher the inscriptions on them. It was not an ancient language or a cipher. The tower's magicians had long since given up on studying the strange inscriptions. How can this be when the young lady just read the entire text that was written on them? Everything was readable, but the man suggested looking at something truly interesting. For example, an artifact that looked very much like jewelry and sparkled like pearls. Wouldn't she like to take one for herself? And her funny hairpin could be thrown away, even though it was given to her by the young duke. After all, with the help of this artifact, she will become so happy that even those around her will notice. In the meantime, the man will lead the lady, and she will be able to look at everything, even though she was only attracted by the stone slabs. They said that others couldn't read it no matter how hard they tried, but then why could she? At that moment, she remembered Kibrin's words when he said that they were not like everyone else. They were monsters. After viewing the artifacts, Cheria immediately went to the young duke, whose classes had already ended. She wondered if he too could read the inscriptions on those stone slabs. Everything was exactly like that, but the lady was a fake monster, but now they could read these inscriptions together. After all, Kibrin was a natural-born genius in the original story, so let's assume that something like this is indeed possible. But the question remained unanswered. Why was she able to read this? Was it because she had entered this body? There were no other reasons that came to mind, but since the young duke also saw them, she was calm. At first, Cheria thought there was something wrong with her eyes, but it turned out to be much simpler. The boy also thought that because he was the only monster like that, he could see these inscriptions. But as soon as Lady Cheria appeared, her whole life turned upside down. And now Kibrin was happy, because he had found such a wonderful friend who understood him. The boy's words were so sincere that it was impossible not to be touched by them. In that case, since he was happy about it, it was good news for the lady. Since Kibrin's lessons were already over for today, he suggested that the ladies go to dinner in the banquet hall. After this conversation, 2 days passed, and having received permission from the Baron and her mother, she went with Viscountess Rose to the estate. But she couldn't even imagine that they would go alone, without any knights to protect them. Why is it needed when she is traveling with a woman? But will she really protect her? This will happen if she wants it, but can a wet nurse act as a guard? Initially, the Duke couple said that anyone who did not think the young master was a monster would do. Still, the father-in-law and mother-in-law know that Rose is not as simple as she seems at first glance. Before leaving, Kibrin said that the Viscountess was not such a bad girl, but the very word girl plunged her into doubt. Is her real name Rose? That's true, she said her adoptive mother gave her that name. The woman also said that she told her not to cause trouble so she would be quiet. Since the young Duke said so, she would try to believe it. Rose hadn't done anything to her yet, even though she had told her to get out. Cheria will hope for her kindness today, even though she did not behave friendly towards her. After some time, the carriage stopped near the estate of Baron Dawson, to which they were heading. After these words, as soon as the carriage opened, the girl immediately and carefully got out of it. A full view of the Baron's estate opened up before her, where no one was waiting to greet them. But the way the building where Dawson lived looked struck the girl with horror. It was amazing, but in a completely different sense, even ordinary common people live much better. Although, according to the Viscountess, a lot of money had been invested in this place. The place didn't look like that at all, but perhaps she was talking about the cage next to the house. It looked in its best condition, like new, and inside sat a bandaged leopard. The Baron dressed so shabbily and took such good care of the leopard that it seemed he really loved animals. And since they had seen everything, in the nurse's opinion it was possible to return to the duchy. Cheria didn't agree with this at all, since she still had to give a housewarming gift. Did she really want to enter this house? Was it all just for the sake of the young duke? Kibrin will be delighted if she says that she came just to see Nina. In that case, the girl will go inside, and if she wants to return alone, then let her leave. This behavior of the little girl angered Rose a little, so she went straight after her. As soon as they entered and the gift was opened, it contained good tea leaves. Cheria and the Viscountess had already settled in the living room while the Baron went off to make tea. Of course, being in such a place was not very pleasant after spending days in the mansion. But Rose was worried about whether she was really going to drink this tea. Now she spoke to her informally. In that case, she will be like that too. These tea leaves were chosen by the maid Mara. It was necessary to at least try them. She too should try to be a polite guest, although strange sounds were coming from above. Judging by the sounds, they were mice, which Rose hated. Although Cheria was the wife of the young duke, it seemed to her that she had grown up in even greater luxury. By this time the tea was ready. The Baron came out with a tray with 3 mugs and a large teapot. Before they left, the lady was interested in how Nina had gotten hurt. She was still covered in bandages. As it turned out, she was attacked by a monster, and she miraculously reached it with a large laceration. And the man helped her mother during childbirth, so apparently she remembered his smell. He thought that her condition was hopeless and nothing would help, even the most expensive medications. But fortunately, the young duke, even at a young age, found a solution to help her. The Baron used the medicinal herbs that Kibrin had told him about, and they helped improve her condition. Although she will still have to undergo treatment for several months, it is a real relief that she was saved. It all seemed strange. Monsters prefer people to animals as their main food. The young lady didn't have to worry. The ducal house didn't allow monsters to attack people, but she was worried that the person sitting next to her might be a monster. Besides this, the young gentleman was amazing. Nina and most of the animals were very drawn to him. When he grows up, the boy will become a very outstanding head of the family, which the Viscountess is not sure of. While they were talking about Kibrin, someone knocked on Daniel's door. The knock was strong and insistent. Apparently something important had happened. It was his friend. Dewey hadn't warned him of his arrival, but now was not the time. His friend caught something much rarer than that leopard, which could not fail to interest the lady. It turned out to be an ordinary rabbit with a slightly unusual fur color, so why was it so rare? The nurse didn't care at all. She was very aggressively opposed to him. Because of this, she grabbed the young duchess, trying to protect her, because his friend couldn't even recognize the monster. Could this really be the monster Rose was talking about, the one whose main food was people? A seemingly harmless rabbit turned out to be so dangerous for everyone who was nearby. He will probably show his true colors when the right person is nearby. But now he is sleeping, because there are only him and a few people around. She openly says that she does not consider herself a person. Then why does the nurse protect her so much? If she hates her, it means she is not afraid of monsters, because she is not human. Only now did Rose realize that the lady was treating her informally, even though she had started it and even told her to get out, which the woman still hasn't denied. But what did the girl do that they are now driving her away? The very fact that she has attached herself to the ducal house is wrong, even though she is married to the young duke. But the Viscountess didn't care, let her get a divorce or do whatever she wanted, but she had to get out of the duke's house. She said this only for the benefit of Cheria, which of course she did not believe. Rose was a kind and fragile woman to others, so she wants to marry Kibrin when she gets divorced. That was definitely not what Rose meant. The lady must be crazy to say something like that. She was an ordinary protector and became one because she has a debt that he must repay. Protector, foster mother, nurse, you could have just said that it was not so, and not gotten angry. While they were arguing heatedly about this, a man who had business with the Viscountess approached them. But as soon as he saw the rabbit, which was a monster, in the hands of one of the people, he immediately fell into a panic. This is what one would expect from a common man who fears monsters for their essence. As soon as everyone panicked, the Baron ordered the young lady to run immediately to the carriage. The nurse immediately took charge of this. She pushed away the man at the door, carrying Cheria in her arms. Because of this act, the rabbit, which was held tightly, was now free. It was impossible not to wake up from this. Panic was everywhere at that moment. But why does Rose care about her so much? If the monster had killed her, the lady would no longer bother her. She didn't do that because the blood was disgusting, and that's why she was so afraid of it. By this time, they had already reached the carriage, opening the doors, and Rose threw the girl inside. The landing wasn't the softest, but as soon as the woman stepped inside, the doors were closed. The young lady did not like this. They could not simply return when such a horror was happening to the Baron. But as Rose already said, this is a low-ranking monster, and 3 ordinary knights can defeat it. That's why the man was able to catch him, but there weren't even 3 knights in the Baron's estate. In that case, they would definitely not cope, and one could immediately say that death awaited them. There was nothing left to do but ask the woman for help. This was the only chance to save them. She ordered to catch this monster because she didn't want innocent people to die. Chiria will stay away from the ducal house for the rest of her life, or at least for one day. The young duke is very attached to the Viscount, and she doesn't want her beloved to be sad. As a guardian, she must take care of the young master. It was a difficult decision, because there was no time to delay. The response lives were at stake. And yet, the Viscountess decided to save everyone who was currently attacked by the monster. It was necessary to act quickly, because this rabbit had already attacked the man who was trying to escape. She held out her hand, her fingers folded as if she were about to snap them. It all looked like a fairy tale, because the young Duchess had never seen anything like this with her own eyes. Viscountess Rose was serious, her eyes fixed only on the rabbit she was trying to kill. And with just one snap of his fingers, the monster began to disappear into red particles, as if it was burning before our eyes. After a few seconds, nothing remained of it, as if the animal had never existed. It was simply amazing. Everything happened so quickly that no one even had time to blink. As it turned out, the nurse had moved him to another distant place, and she wanted her to kill him. Recalling that the blood was disgusting to look at, Chiria was impressed by it. After all, I just saw with my own eyes how magic, different from divine magic, actually works. The woman was a very good person, even though she said all sorts of nasty things. And today, she was very cool. Such words embarrassed her a little, which is why Rose could not help but boast about herself. The young lady was also quite brave, but there was no need to go out of her way every time. Still, Kibrin was right in that she was not a bad person, as she seemed at first glance. After another short trip, they returned to the mansion, where a maid was already waiting for them. But even though they had already arrived, the Viscountess did not take her eyes off the young Duchess until the very end. So far, she seemed like the most ordinary girl, but if she was ordinary, it was even worse for her. If the seal of the young duke is removed, this girl will be the first to die, because she was the closest. But apparently nothing can be done about it. She's unlikely to want to listen to it again. The seal of Cybran is too unstable, so much so that no one would be surprised if it broke tonight. And all this time, the temple continues to call the boy a monster, but he is not just an ordinary monster. He is an apex predator known for his curse, a serpent god, a devil, a fallen morning star. It would have been better if the woman had not used the spell that day, otherwise everything would have turned out differently. When she eased their fear with a spell, the servants in the Duke's house stopped fearing Kibrin. It would have been better if the nurse had left everything as it was, so that they would be afraid it was impossible to allow him everything, especially to create good memories and convince yourself that in this house and in the Duke's house, everything is the same. It would have been safer for everyone, but now it was too late to change anything, much less fix it. All that was left was to monitor the boy's behavior and try to protect whoever he could in the future. But for now, the woman acknowledged that the current Kibrin was a good child who would not harm anyone. And if the boy regains memories of his past life, in which he was a snake, everything will only get worse. But she told Chiria to get away from here because she was genuinely worried about her. After some time, the Baron came to them and apologized for the situation with the monster. Luckily, Chiria was unharmed, but his friend, who recklessly brought the monster, will be punished based on the results of the investigation. Apart from this, the man hasn't changed at all. He still lives with the possessed monster in the slums. Even though he tried to convince the Duchess that it was Nina, she still remained a monster. The Baron was supposed to file a complaint about the slums, but now was not the time. The woman asked him to bring Nina. After all, Kibrin said that he wanted to see her, and it would be better for both him and this beast. This was wonderful news. If she allowed her to stay in the Duke's house, he would be very grateful to her. But will it be possible for him to come every day to see the leopard let him do as he pleases? It was like a blessing from the mistress of the young moon and the forests of the new moon. But what does a possessed monster mean? This leopard was half eaten by the monster. She just shared half of her flesh. Usually, if an animal is eaten, it dies instantly, but sometimes it happens that, on the contrary, it absorbs the fangs of the animal. And this Nina seemed to have received a very strong life force from him, which is why Dewey said that he brought a much rarer animal. Much time passed since this conversation, and the next day came when Baron Dawson brought Nina. Kibrin was glad that he would now be able to see Nina every day, and she, recognizing the boy, wagged her tail. This scene could not help but touch everyone around, a reunion of long familiar friends. And so, unnoticed, winter came to the duchy. The area was covered with snow and turned white, and there was frost outside. At this time, the young duke was pruning the rose stems, which had to be done carefully because of the thorns. But the boy did everything perfectly, and in a short time all the flowers were ready and placed in a vase. But the lady had no idea that she had no talent for floristry at all. Her hands were all pricked with thorns. Cheria was good at making knot decorations, but even with one task her hands wouldn't obey. Baron Linton must find out soon that she had no talent at all, which will happen soon, before it is too late. Luckily for Kibrin, she didn't hear his phrase, which was even better. There was some noise in the street, and thanks to the young duke, we managed to find out who it was. People from the temple arrived. It was terrible, because now the young lady would be in trouble again because of them. It was worth checking everything with her own eyes, but she still couldn't do anything with the flowers. They followed the Duke and Duchess, who ordered that the castle gates should not be opened under any circumstances in their absence. It was unexpected that they were going somewhere, and for some time perhaps it was somehow connected with the forest. Everything was exactly like this. This time it will take a few days, and in the meantime the maids will look after them. After all, a battle for territory between monsters began on the Lake of the Full Moon, and it couldn't be left so easily. While the woman was telling this to the girl, she noticed that her hands were all covered in bandages. This greatly angered the Duchess, as Cheria's hands were badly damaged. The floristry classes should have been stopped immediately. They were of no use anyway. While the woman was talking to the young lady, at that moment the Duke approached Kibrin. Finally, the day came when the boy decided to accompany him, probably because he had a beautiful daughter-in-law. The atmosphere between them was very tense. The young duke had no intention of answering his father. He just watched as they gradually walked away together, still looking furiously at his father's back. They promised to return soon, and nothing should happen in their absence, so there was no point in worrying. With these words, the father-in-law and mother-in-law left the castle. They certainly shouldn't delay. But no matter how much she thought about it, it was strange. The letter came from the temple, which meant they were up to something. There was no need to worry, because the castle gates would be closed. What could happen during this time? The rest of the day passed as usual, until towards nightfall the lady developed a stomach ache. Perhaps she ate too much again, although she thought that now she could eat as much as she wanted. At such a time, she didn't particularly want to wake Elena up while Cheria was walking along the corridors. She heard the maids talking. Some still hadn't left. They brazenly demanded to be let in if they didn't want to bring God's wrath upon themselves. As it turned out, 2 high priests had come and were doing God knows what. That's why her stomach hurt so much. The problem was with them. And these were not just ordinary priests, but great ones. Their divine power must be several times stronger than that of ordinary ones. What should I do now? Go back to my room or go up to the top floor? And when the girl passed by Kibrin's room, he came out of there because he had just woken up. He assumed that she didn't like sleeping alone, so he suggested that she sleep with him that day. She immediately agreed, because it would be better to do this than to wander around the house alone. After which they went into the young duke's room tonight. They would spend the night next to him. They immediately headed to bed, and as soon as they were comfortable, it was time to sleep. It was so cold outside that the young lady's nose turned red, which looked cute, and after Kibrin touched the lady's cheek with his hand, he used divine power. But why did he just cure her? Now her stomach didn't hurt at all, even though he hadn't done anything like that. Just recently she felt unwell, but when she is with him she immediately feels better. Immediately remembering that something similar had already happened in the castle, this time everything was exactly the same. The young duke was only glad that Sharia now felt much better. In the meantime, he would be there so that the girl could sleep peacefully tonight. Actually, the young duchess should be taking care of him, but instead he takes care of her. If you think about it, when Kibrin was in that palace, he was somehow scared and quiet. He hardly cried and often reproached himself, calling himself a monster, but at that time he was completely different. But now he had changed a lot, for the better, and now one could rely on him. In that case, there was no need to worry about him so much anymore, and to quietly keep an eye on him from the side. This proved that the young duke was growing well, so now he could breathe a little easier. At this time, it was reported in the temple that 2 great priests had arrived, but they were turned back without even being heard. Therefore, His Holiness earnestly asked that this holy, funny old man be conveyed, but if he needed anything, let him come himself. But there is some truth in the old man's words: the useless and eternally sick girl arouses suspicion. In that case, let him convey that the saint is concerned about the well-being of her sister, and therefore would like to see her in person. The next day, it turned out that the 2 high priests had been arguing for 2 whole hours, demanding to be let in. Mara was furious and said that they would definitely pay for such disrespect to the duke's family. The girl told all this to Viscountess Rose, who was lying next to her on the floor, but did she listen at all? But most importantly, Sharia was now glad that she no longer even pretended to play the role of a nanny. And yet perhaps it was because of that incident in the carriage, but now it seemed that they were closer than before. She may be strong, but she's not as bad as she tries to seem. While the young duchess was thinking about this, the nurse next to her screamed. The cause of her scream and fear turned out to be a very ordinary worm that was simply crawling nearby. She thought something serious had happened until she saw it, but she was scared of some worm. It was even funny, but to stop the woman from screaming anymore, all that was left was to throw it away. She was so scared because of the worm, although Rose even made the demon disappear and was not afraid of him. He was scary, but a half-human hiding behind a child because he was afraid of worms was much more vile. After such a heroic act, Rose admitted that the lady turned out to be cooler than she thought all this time. So she does know what shame is, but what's so cool about it, other servants can easily deal with it too. But how could she know what the other servants were capable of? Hadn't they become friends, since everyone spoke well of her? It was because she used a spell to make people think so well of her. Everything was done so that they would feel sympathy for the nurse, and so that Kibrin would be less afraid. By the way, there were no side effects, and this is not brainwashing. It is just a way for a creature like her to naturally fit into the human world. This is an incomprehensible person. Can she really just tell her all this? Does she really want her to be scared? Everything was exactly like that. Even though the woman had just said that she had cast a spell, Sharia's reaction to it was somehow sluggish. Perhaps it was because she didn't use it on the ducal couple, simply out of pity for them. But so be it. The young lady admitted that she was ugly, even though you couldn't tell it from her face. Moreover, the girl had known for a long time that she was not human, so there was nothing else to be surprised or afraid of. Moreover, she told everything herself, but apart from this, people cannot perform such miracles as she does. Cannot make a demon disappear into thin air, cannot use spells. The Viscountess is still tough, but the lady could not worry. Even if she wanted to kick her out of the ducal house, she still would not kill her. But Rose would be grateful if she kept her secret, because she was too lazy to cast the spell again. In any case, even if she told everything, no one would believe her so easily, so Sharia will keep her secret. And all this time she wanted to ask if she was hiding her gender with her spell. But from the day the wet nurse became a nanny, she was always in the body of a human woman. The young duchess did not expect this, but now they will not leave her without an answer as to how exactly she sees her. How could it happen that a woman did not hide her gender when everyone sees her differently? All this time the Viscountess demanded a direct answer because it could not be that they saw her differently. Luckily for the girl, Kibrin managed to run to them, as if he felt that he had to save the lady. Now she was saved, which made her happy, because now she wouldn't have to answer the Viscountess's question. Apparently the boy had already finished his fencing lessons. Everything was so because the weather became very cold, so they decided to take a break for now to make the boy feel more comfortable. All this time the lady looked at his hand. The burn was still there, and he still winced when he squeezed something tightly. Is it really possible for a scar to be healed only in a temple? It seems that even this subhuman could not do anything about it. It would be necessary to come up with a way to heal his hand, and the only thing that came to mind was magic. Fortunately, the young Duchess already knew where to find a person who could use magic. It was surprising that Emil didn't go to the cleanup, but his specialty was wide-range magic. So there was little use for him there, but what brought her here, she had already looked through this whole room a long time ago. The thing is, she was worried about the wound on Kibrin's hand, and whether it would be difficult to heal with magic. The man could help with recovery to some extent, but it was nothing compared to treatment from a priest. Moreover, the young duke constantly refused his help, although he would not at all be sorry to give all his magical power to the future master. In that case, can a man put his magical power into a scarf, and Sharia will try to persuade him? It was a wonderful idea. Emil would only be grateful if the girl could do it. While he was putting in magical power, the girl kept looking at the stone slabs behind her, as if trying to read. It was all strange, so had the man ever seen things differently from others? The young lady was embarrassed by the fact that she could easily read the stone slabs when no one else could. And Rose's appearance, while everyone sees her as a fragile woman, for a lady she is, on the contrary, a mountain of muscles. There are so many things that she sees differently than others, whether it's because she's a time traveler or because she's a monster. Surely it wasn't that simple, but even if there was, he would have pretended not to see it. In the dark city where the man came from, the heads of chattering people rolled around like tumbleweeds. But compared to him, the young madam did not need to hide and remain silent. After all, the Duke and Duchess valued her very much, and perhaps they would even be glad if she consulted with them. This is not the time when she was in the house of Count Mariol, and not the time when she was just sold, and the lady knew nothing. There were many people in this place who valued Sharia. There was no need to suffer alone. Of course, there was no point in telling the truth about her being a time traveler, but besides that, Emil was interested in whether she knew how the boy had injured his arm. She heard that he got hurt because of the monster. In that case, everything was fine. But there was only one request. He asked to help him recover at least a little, because Madame was very upset. She blamed herself, saying that it was because of her that His Excellency had lost his right hand. And now the young Duke has also injured his hand. But didn't the Duke get injured when he caused a disturbance in the temple? And now, after the court magician's words, everything became clear why Mother, seeing the wounds on her hand, was so angry. It was necessary to persuade Kibrin to agree to at least some kind of treatment for his hand. And will Sharia be able to ask the man for a favor again next time, but he himself would like to ask her about it. Let her make sure that the young Duke was constantly treated. That was her only wish. Now, walking along the corridors towards the boy, she hoped that he would use her handkerchief. Next time I'll need to take more bandages. While the lady was thinking about it, she didn't even notice Rose in front of her. The Viscountess had been looking for her all this time, because the girl never answered her question. The woman would definitely not leave her alone so easily. That was exactly how Sharia saw her. Now the girl would not be able to avoid answering, especially since there was no one nearby who could help. I had to improvise she looked like the young Duke's nanny, although sometimes she spoke like a child. So, in her eyes, she is also an ordinary person. That's all she apparently wanted to know. But that's not the point now. The lady should have listened to her and been careful around Kibrin. What she meant was that she shouldn't have put her in the same category as the people from the temple. Rose meant something completely different. When the seal weakens and it is necessary to flee, the nurse will certainly grab it and run away. Just to warn you, just in case, but why did she want to run away from the young Duke? Apparently the woman started talking nonsense again, and only at that moment did it dawn on her that the lady's words about her being afraid of her were a lie. But the Viscountess spoke seriously, and she could not show her face without prying eyes. At that moment the girl remembered Kibrin's words, that the nanny told him that only the same monster could heal another monster. Could it be that the reason she told him that the same monster could heal him was because of her? Everything was exactly like this. She meant her true essence because she was not human. It was necessary to find out everything better, but in the corridor, where a maid could appear at any moment, this was impossible. In that case, the young Duchess grabbed Rose by the hand, trying to take her to another place. They came to a room where she immediately asked if she was able to cure everything in that case. For example, hands, scales on the face, or remove the seal, and why does she say that she will grab it and run away? She didn't mean the treatment the lady was thinking of, although she did say treatment, it was more like isolation. Does the girl really think that Kibrin can become an ordinary child like everyone else? Everything was like that. He was too cute. This was not the answer. In that case, it was worth listening carefully. A snake was sealed in the boy's body. And this snake has a very bad character. The woman knows this because she lived with him for several years. So that's why Kibrin constantly had scales on his face and when he lived with Rose. But even if she and the young duke separated, she did not plan to marry him. There was no need to imagine anything unnecessary. After all, they were a family, but spouses are also a family, but it was completely different. This snake came to her to repay her for caring for him as she did for herself. The prophetess said that if the Viscountess waited in the duchy, he would come again. Although she said that the young duke owed her something last time, they can be said to be one and the same person. More precisely, this snake was Kibrin's past life. What is now sealed in it are traces of that past life. Memories of a past life, the power of a past life, something like that. When the boy died in his past life, she was too far away from him, and later, when she found him, she realized that he died of insanity. Therefore, if Kibrin regains his memories of his past life, he may become very unstable. Now the young Duchess knew the whole truth about the boy, and it was not the best. But does she still think that there is nothing terrible about him? But now everything has become only more confusing. How did the boy grow into the psychopathic villain from the original? Did he become like that because he lost his memories of his past life? Or, remembering the past, he killed all the members of the ducal family, but now she wants to leave the young duke. Now it was clear what the purpose of her story was, but who was she in that case? It turned out that Viscountess Rose had been a bird all along, which didn't quite add up. After all, birds eat worms, and there was no need to be afraid these were terrible things, and she wouldn't even come close to growing such unclean creatures. Anyway, she's a bird, and Dell took her in and taught her the magic of turning her into a human. The young Duchess has simply not yet seen her true form. She is quite cool in it. And if suddenly she imagines something like a dove, then she will immediately say that the lady is very much mistaken. So Kibrin's name in his past life was Dell, but the conversation went in the wrong direction. So she still doesn't intend to abandon the young duke after what she learned about him, but that wasn't part of the lady's plans. She doesn't want the people of the ducal family to die, so she decided to raise Kibrin well. In that case, nothing could be done. At that moment, the atmosphere between them began to deteriorate. Is she really going to cast magic or even a curse on her to drive her out of this house? Then she won't be able to look after the boy anymore and won't even be able to see him for the last time. But as soon as Viscountess Rose snapped her fingers, a small feather appeared in her hands. Now this red-orange feather belonged to a lady. It was some kind of gift from a woman for catching that worm and for not running away immediately after learning her true nature. If she has this thing, Kibrin will not kill her immediately, even if the seal weakens. It was very sweet that even such a seemingly bad person cared about her so much. Since this was a gift from the heart, the young lady will be happy to cherish this feather. But now that they had finished talking, it was time for her to leave, because she still had to bandage the young duke. At this time, he should probably be in his room getting ready for bed, like everyone else. As soon as the girl reached Kibrin's room, she immediately knocked on the door, hoping to see him. But just a few seconds after she knocked, a scream was heard from behind. It was the young duke who was trying to call out to Lady Cheria as he ran towards her. As soon as he reached the girl, he immediately announced that they needed to go to bed quickly. It was too unexpected, but she obeyed him and immediately went to bed with him. They had to go to bed early today, but the young Duchess had no idea what was going on. After they went to bed, footsteps were heard from the hallway. And after a very short time, some woman entered their room who could not be seen because of the darkness. After some time, having made sure that the children were asleep, the woman left the room just as quietly as she had entered. While she stood there and watched, Cheria's hands were shaking with fear the whole time. Fortunately, the doors to the room were not immediately closed, and the lady heard the voices of the maids standing at the door. It was Mara who reported that the young madam had fallen asleep early, so someone had to go back. But then the doors closed, making it impossible to hear the rest of the conversation properly. In that case, since there was no one there now, it was possible to get up. But what was that? As it turned out, the temple sent its people to them, saying that the saint was worried about how her sister was doing. So it wasn't because of Kibrin that they came, but because of Cheria. Her sister wasn't going to back down even after she was kicked out of the family. The boy remembered that the lady had said that she had a bad relationship with her family. If so, then they probably weren't too worried. Besides, it seemed to him that it would be better for her not to approach the temple, given the peculiarities of her body. But how did he know about her problems? It was because the boy was always watching her. She remembered a conversation with the court magician about how it would be worth consulting with someone. If she consults with Kibrin, everything will probably be fine and he will not judge her. Then you can tell her that when there is a possessor of divine power next to her, she feels unwell, and the condition of the body worsens. But since the saint is her blood relative, this does not apply to her. Then, if in the future people from the temple come, the young duke will immediately inform her about it. Emil was right to speak out to someone from the ducal family, and it seems that Kibrin was happy. And before she forgot, she went to the boy to give him the handkerchief into which Emil had poured his magic. She thought that if he tied his hand with this scarf, he would feel much better. It was worth doing this twice a week, although once might have been enough. The man said that this would help him recover, although not completely. But whether he would agree, Emil said that Kibrin immediately refused when he proposed, but she wanted him to feel at least a little better. Cheria hastily asked to put magic into the scarf, but next time she will definitely bring bandages. Now refusals were not accepted, since the young duke had once accepted help from her. And now, since everything had long since calmed down, the young lady could go to her room to sleep. But when she lay down in her bed, she forgot to tell Kibrin that she saw Rose in the form of a man, but perhaps everything would be okay. Several days passed from that moment, and the people from the temple visited the mansion again. But the timing was very unfortunate, because that day Winter and Maneric were returning from the expedition. The Templars were now talking to the Duchess, and the saint, worried about her only sister, said that she had to see for herself. This answer did not suit her, since it was only for this reason that they behaved so rudely during their absence. But since she had heard what they wanted from her, it was now possible to talk inside. The sister probably assumed that the priest would be expelled again, just like last time. And so she sent this young priest away without any divine power, but Unther was still worried about the lady. After all, the fact that people from the temple came because of her clearly made the girl nervous, which was obvious. But it's okay, these monsters, who aren't even as big as dogs, seem to be really bothering the girl. Usually she is very kind, but at such moments she became scared, as if she was not herself. And if the saint calls, but the young lady does not want to go, then she may not go, because she does not need to fulfill all their demands. That was exactly it, and besides, the great temple was full of divine power, which would immediately make her feel ill. But still, she doesn't want the entire ducal house to suffer because of this, so Cheria will go. Their real target was Kibrin anyway, so they wouldn't torture her too much. Moreover, the temple's behavior is suspicious, so it is necessary to double-check whether her assumptions are correct. Unfortunately, the Duchess forbade it, although if she doesn't go, her sister will pester her a lot. She could have gone alone and quickly. If the girl's parents and the saint had behaved well with her, then okay. But everyone knows that this was not so. But what if they do differently and the Duke goes with her? Moreover, the man was completely free. The head of the family says so confidently that he is free. In that case, will he make sure that no problems arise? Of course he will, because that is his specialty. What was shocking was that the woman had been talking to Cheria the whole time, not to the Duke. Will the young lady be able to ensure that Rick does not do any mischief? This only finished off the man. She had to find a way out somehow, so she would keep a close eye on her father to make sure he didn't do anything wrong. All that remained was to hope that the girl had said everything correctly, otherwise she wouldn't be allowed anywhere. But fortunately, the Duchess agreed, but on the condition that they be careful. It was a wise decision. In that case, they can leave tomorrow, and if they use the teleport, they can return quickly. The Duke did not agree with this. The departure would be in 3 days. Chiria was still in poor health. That's why they won't use the teleport, but in that case it will take 10 days. They have nowhere to rush, although the saint is impatiently awaiting the young duchess. Apparently he did not understand the man. Departure is in 4 days, and they will not use the teleport. This is the only offer. If this is the will of His Excellency, then we will have to submit, otherwise the temple will only get worse. Apparently the father was angry because of what the mother said, so he decided to take out his anger on the boy. The conversation wasn't particularly productive, but the Kramovits had to leave with at least something before things got worse. But the Duke had his own plan. He didn't just say that they would leave in 4 days. He wanted to invite Chiria to play a game of surveillance and find out what they were planning with such persistence. It turns out that they will have to follow someone and eavesdrop on their secrets. This proposal sounded very tempting, because the girl was also interested in what they were planning. That same day, as soon as night fell, they immediately set out on reconnaissance. There were some bushes near the temple that were ideal for surveillance. It seems that the other priests have a little divine power. Nothing can be done. Since she decided to keep an eye on them, she will have to accept it. But the bushes were far away for the young lady, which is why she could not hear anything. But for the swordmaster, this distance was enough. They put up a crude barrier, but for the swordmaster this is no obstacle. If he hears anything, he will pass it on. After all, for a swordmaster, this is not at all difficult. He somehow strangely insisted on this. The first thing the Duke heard was not the most pleasant news for him. They said that the food in the duchy was not tasty at all. How dare these temple members speak like that, not knowing their place, and say such rude things? The girl immediately understood that they were talking about her mother. It was necessary to somehow calm the Duke down. Nothing better came to mind than to say that Mother is the most beautiful and graceful woman in the world. These words immediately calmed the man. He thought exactly the same as she did, stroking Chiria on the head. Perhaps the people from the church scold the mother precisely because of her past. The kingdom of Mauritius, a small kingdom, smaller than a duchy, that existed 300 years ago. Thanks to the highly developed witchcraft and magic, it flourished for a long time, and the mother was the last heir to this kingdom. But the kingdom of Mauritius fell long ago, so it is unlikely that this is the only reason. And unlike other foreign aristocrats, the temple's attitude was bad towards the duchess. Then they also mentioned that she was not a citizen of the empire. The more she thought about it, the more they irritated her. Suddenly, the conversation turned to animals. They say that on the day of their departure, they saw a strange red bird fly into the Duke's city mansion. Apparently, they were talking about Rose, although there shouldn't be any good omens in the ducal house. So Rose's true appearance is considered a good omen, but she has no intention of hiding her identity at all. As a result, the temple suddenly stirred due to the appearance of a good omen and the fact that the ducal house remained too calm, even after pulling Kibrin out of the snake's lair. But there was something else besides this conversation, but the Duke was in no hurry to tell Chiria about it. What did the man want to say when he asked about this? He didn't say anything, but it was time for them to go back. Since the Duke had heard good news from the Templars, it was necessary to leave a gift. This gift had to be from the heart, and the stone lying nearby was well suited for this. Manrik kicked a pebble towards one of the men, hitting him square in the neck. The man who was hit thought that it was one of the priests, so he shouted angrily at them. It was a wonderful blow, just what he had hoped for, which was good news. My heart immediately felt lighter from such a gift for information, of course. His character wasn't the best. But is the Duke sure that he can leave the duchy and go with Chiria to the Great Temple? There was no need to worry about that. Winter always did all the work for him anyway. And the servants loved the Duchess more than him. But why did he say this with such joy? Probably because a woman can be trusted. To be honest, sometimes when he is disturbed, he wants to kill everyone. This is why Kibrin avoids him, because when he was little, he asked his father not to kill him. Even if he was a monster, the boy didn't want to die at all, especially at his father's hands. When Kibrin was first born, the man told him to kill him because he felt that the boy, who was considered a monster, would only make life difficult for him in winter. Although Manrik later became attached to him, the young gentleman has a very good memory. So he remembers everything, and now it's too late to change anything. Now it was clear what the matter was. That's why the relationship between Kibrin and the Duke seemed so bad. It was cruel. After all, if they interfere with him, he will not spare his own son, in which case it would be better for Chariya to go to the temple alone. The man here is pouring out his soul to get closer, and she is so cold, but wasn't this a warning for the girl not to interfere? But didn't the young duke tell her such things? These words only made her angry, because he doesn't say such things. Why would her sweet bun say such things? Kibrin accepts her well, even when she comes to him when he is busy, which means she has considered herself one of those who interfere. While they were walking to the duchy, Chariya asked him to let her go, but the man did not agree, because she was trembling so much that she would not be able to walk. After some time, they finally returned to the castle, where the Duchess and the young Duke were already waiting for them. The girl immediately noticed that the boy had gone out into the cold, although he could easily catch a cold. All this time the Duke stood somewhere behind, still thinking about what he had heard and said. In the past, when Kibrin was just born, he tried to convince Winter that it would only be harder for her if he stayed. Therefore, if she only allows it, he will be able to solve it in his own way. But the woman already knew what the Duke was going to do with the baby. He simply wanted to kill him. Although he did not yet know that he would regret his words in the future, which is what happened. There was a place in his heart not only for the Duchess, in which she was not mistaken. She was never mistaken. Manrik will probably regret that day forever, because now nothing can be returned. But unlike him, Winter, as the last heir to the fallen, but once prosperous thanks to the worship of snakes, kingdom of Marisha. She was born incapable of experiencing special feelings for ordinary people who lack abilities. So what kind of child is this that the woman is showing such interest in? Who is Chariya really? But as for the gift for the saint, it was ordered that everything be prepared by tomorrow noon. Is the man sure that nothing needs to be prepared for his holiness, but he already has all the best that he could possibly like? In any case, the servant had to take care of his daughter-in-law so that she did not run away. If their excellency treated her well, that would be more than enough. The Duke had no such intentions yet. Remembering that the Templars had said that it would be better to take advantage of this opportunity and check whether the young master's bride was an ordinary person. Isn't it strange that she adapted to the monster's lair at such a young age? Snakes always travel in pairs, which urgently needed to be checked.